All right.
Yeah, they get started.
Okay. I hereby call to order the Village of Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. Ann, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Pelletier? Here. Commissioner Marhold?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Braun?
Here.
And Commissioner Hennigan.
Here.
All right. If I could just note that Chairperson Mateo is not here today, so if we could get a motion and a second to appoint Commissioner Hennigan as temporary chair?
So moved.
Second. And a roll call?
Roll call. Okay. Commissioner Pelletier?
Yes.
Commissioner Marhold?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Braun?
Yes.
And Commissioner Hennigan.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'll note for the record that our village attorney, Michael Mars, is present. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes for the January 25th, 2023 meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Does anyone have any changes to the minutes? Okay. Ann, please call the roll.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Yes.
Commissioner Marhold?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Braun?
Yes.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Yes. All right, the motion was approved. Is there anyone present who would like to speak about an item that is not on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the village board update. Ann, do you have an update on the village board?
Yes, I do. On February 2nd, the village board approved the TOD-related ordinances and the accessory structures ordinance. Trustee Pollock, who led and drafted the accessory structures ordinance effort, helped staff to draft public information handouts on the accessory structure amendments, and those are now available on the village's website and for the public. In other news during that meeting, the board denied the variation request for the fence at 148 Maplewood Road that had been recommended for denial by the commission. The board considered and approved an accommodation under the ADA for the same fence at 148 Maplewood Road, and that ordinance was approved by the board during their February 16th meeting. Also on February 16th, the board approved the temporary tent ordinance. Since the board approved that ordinance, which authorizes the zoning administrator to approve temporary event tents and street yards, Riverside Presbyterian Church withdrew their application for a variation to allow a temporary tent in the street yard. During that same meeting on February 16th, the board also discussed the site plan review process and directed staff to draft revisions to the zoning ordinance, which the commission will review tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to our public hearings and recommendations. The first public hearing for this evening is PZ 23-0003, 95 Groveland Avenue. This is a public hearing to consider an application for variations from Section 1017-3D, accessory structure and uses, and Section 1074, permitted encroachments of the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance. The variations are sought to build a first-story deck that will encroach 5 feet into the street yard and to build a deck on the second story of the house. And the petitioner is Romney Cirillo. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The notice of the public hearing was published in the Landmark on March 1st, 2023, and will be marked as an exhibit. The remaining application materials will be marked as a second exhibit. Is there a motion to accept these exhibits?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Does anyone in the audience plan to give testimony this evening? If so, please stand and raise your right hand. You'll be sworn in. Anyone who will be speaking this evening on behalf of the variation at 95 Groveland? Okay. Do you swear that the testimony you will give is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Ann, could you present the memo?
Sure. So I'll briefly introduce the application, then the petitioner would like to speak. So the subject property is located in the R3 zoning district on Groveland Road. It contains a single-family 2-story home that faces Groveland Avenue, and it has a detached garage in the back. The front entrance to the house previously consisted of 4 stairs between 2 knee walls. There was no landing at the doorstep, so the door just opened directly onto the stairs. The stairs were structurally unsound and they've been removed. So the front edge of the second story of the home is set back approximately 10.5 feet from the front edge of the first story. So there's a little bit of a roof on the first story that is overlooked by 2 front windows on the second story. So there are 2 variation requests. The first is for a first-story deck. And so just to differentiate, in the zoning code, a deck is differentiated from a porch by the lack of having a roof over it. And a deck is also differentiated from a balcony by having a structure underneath it, whereas a balcony cantilevers over into the open air. So the petitioner seeks to build new front stairs and a deck, which will also serve as a landing to the front door along the front of the house. The deck would extend 5 feet from the front of the house towards Groveland Avenue. And so the issue is that would encroach into the street yard, and that would be a prohibited encroachment into the street yard. Per the zoning code sections 10.11.4 and 10.7.3D3, decks are prohibited in front street yards. So the applicant is seeking a variation for that purpose, and I'll let him describe further the criteria that he meets. Regarding the second-story deck, the petitioner also seeks to build a second-story deck on the house. The zoning code specifically states that decks can be as high as the elevation of the first floor of the house, so a variation is required for the second-story deck. And again, it's a deck because it is not covered by a roof, and it's not a balcony. So the zoning code specifically prohibits that as well. And, let's see. I believe that's it in terms of a summary, and if Romney, if you want to step to the podium, you can describe your plans and how you meet the criteria.
Hello, my name is Ronnie Cirillo. I have lived at 95 Groveland since 2017. This is coming through, right? Is that good? Yeah. My plans are currently to do as Ann has described. Our home, currently located on our block, is obviously well within a flood zone, so we've made a lot of adjustments since moving into our home in 2017 to accommodate utilities and various things to help our property through that flood mitigation issues that Groveland's already been in talks with for, from my understanding, quite some time now. So besides making the correct adjustments, I've worked on just recently upgrading our utilities for sewer and water into our home, and through that process found and knew our entrance to the front door of our home was not to code. It never was when we purchased the home. So in the process of trenching, we found that the steps leading up into the home were not supported by any structural support. So I had that removed and now would like to put the appropriate structure in place for what I'm requesting, which would be a front porch. Furthermore, I have support, which you guys have seen from both my neighbors to the south and the north. And everything that we've done on our property as of date has been to improve the aesthetic on not only our home, but our block. Very proud to live here in Riverside, have been a very supportive member in the community. Very proud to admit that I've just completed a few substantial projects here in town, one including the Coonley House, which is the Frank Lloyd Wright property here in town, along others. And last but not least, I also provided to the board and yours entities various pictures of properties that I found throughout the entire village of Riverside that are very similar to what my plans are and what my architects have drawn up.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the petitioner?
Can I just say something first? So this is for both applicants tonight. I just wanted to bring to your attention that, we are short, the chairperson is not here, and we're short another commissioner. And I wanted to point out to you that the village's zoning ordinance requires for variations 4 positive votes in order for it to be considered a positive recommendation to the board. If you don't get a positive recommendation, it still goes to the board, but you need the favorable vote of 2/3 of all of the trustees at the board level in order to approve that variation. So that's an extra majority vote because the way the statute's worded, the village president doesn't get the opportunity to break ties or vote in that case. So it's a little tougher if you don't get the 4 votes. The school district, you have even a little more of an issue because one of our commissioners will need to recuse himself. So you'll need all 4 commissioners to vote in favor of your variations for that supermajority at the board level to not apply. So if either party wishes to continue this to the next meeting, you're welcome to let us know, and we will do so. But I just wanted to call that to everybody's attention.
Do I have a chance to speak?
Yep.
Due to those restrictions or limitations, I have to make a decision upon those before I would let you vote? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct, yeah. So I know it's kind of out of the blue for you, but, and it's not a huge difference. I mean, you need 4 votes of the board members to approve an ordinance approving your variations anyways at the board level. So the only real difference at the board level is that the village president doesn't get to break those ties or cast a vote in the.
Okay. And the next meeting for you would be?
Sure, it's I believe it's April 3rd. I apologize, I'll confirm the date for you.
April 3rd.
Yeah. Or I'm sorry, of this commission, or, I'm sorry.
Are we speaking on this commission or?
I'm
Right.
sorry, I got very confused. This commission meets the 4th Thursday of every, or excuse me, 4th Wednesday of every month. So off the top of my head, I believe it's April,
26th, I believe.
26th, thank
Okay.
you. I apologize. And
So
then
I
the next
can
village board meeting.
postpone tonight and come back for the 26th to have everybody in attendance potentially.
No, we would have 1 fewer commission member. Our chairperson will also not be able to attend the next April meeting,
Okay.
or the April meeting, excuse
So
me.
I'd be in the
Yeah,
same.
so we can't guarantee anything
Right.
because we don't know everybody's schedules. But,
Sure.
it would be our hope that we'd have 6 members as opposed to 5.
Okay.
Does anybody have ideas? Does anybody know for sure they're missing the April meeting?
I will not be.
Okay.
Actually, I don't think I will be here either, so we
Okay.
might even have a quorum.
So it's.
Same.
So it sounds like you'll
Thing
be in the
in
same
April.
situation next month, yeah.
I would like to add and mention that I've applied for permits and had current said work done on sewer and water lines into my home. So the front property does not look ideal to the village standards.
Sure.
To say in the least. So with said information and what I've already presented, I would like to move forward at this
Okay.
meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Mars. With that, do any of the commissioners have any questions for the petitioner at this time?
Yes. You mentioned that the existing stair was out of code. Was that due to the lack of a front
Landing.
landing right as you went out the door?
Correct. So our steps would lead to the front door and you'd be on steps to open said
And you'd
door.
immediately drop down?
Correct. Yeah. The home, before we purchased it, was in a trust. So the woman who lived there passed away, and the family then sold said house. So, fortunately, a lot of things. We've done a lot of work since 2017 on our home to get it to code.
I have some questions if you don't have anything else.
Good.
If you were to be approved to put the deck on, will you need to do any additional work regarding the front foundation of the house or anything else before doing the deck addition?
No, everything that I've done to the, let's just call main structure of the home, would not require any additional work for what I would be proposing here tonight.
Okay. And under the deck, are you planning on making the ground surface permeable? And
Yes.
allowing water to flow through the slats of the deck?
Yes. While I'm not presenting it tonight, unfortunately, due to living in a flood zone, everything I'm doing on my property is talking about permeable surfaces, including, I have a very extensive driveway, if you look at the plot of survey, and my plans are for the singular portion of my driveway in the next year or two to change that into permeable pavers to allow for more drainage on my property. I'm essentially in the center of Groveland Avenue, so it's a bowl. And I wasn't here in 2013 when the flood hit, and I know a lot of people in this village are aware of what happened on Groveland all the way to Lincoln. And I work in water, so I'm very familiar with what I want to do to mediate water. So I'm doing a lot of drainage, and I'm actually advertising it throughout town to alleviate a number of properties through town with substantial flood issues through rain retention. So I've already started that on my property.
So what other work do you think you might be doing
Not specific to my porches.
on your property?
But you're saying for
Yes,
rain?
in general, yeah.
Yep, so we work with a company called Aquascape Inc. out of St. Charles. They're a national distributor for ponds, waterfalls, water features. They also do rain retention programs, and besides what many of people have in their in the town are barrels connected to their rain gutters, I actually have a storage system located on my property that alleviates rainwater because my backyard used to flood.
Okay.
Now it doesn't flood. Now I'm actually collecting that water and utilizing it for all my plants on the property and stuff like that.
Is that
So,
above ground or below ground?
Under.
Underground, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting,
Yep,
all right.
yep, on a small level, but would like to get larger, and that's what I've started to do already.
So given your property, even if you don't get any river water from
I was
flooding.
gonna say, I can't stop a
you
river,
get-
unfortunately.
You get water when it rains, all the water on the block sort of comes into your yard.
In the backyard, it was, because both of my neighbors' properties to the north and the south are higher than mine, which
Yeah.
just happened over time with builders, go figure, so.
One other question. What you're proposing on the front of the property is, on the first floor, is a deck. Is there a reason why you didn't want to have that a roof structure, make it a porch?
Felt it would be more challenging to convince to allow a structure over above, and what I'm also proposing above would then have to have it tie into what I want to do above. And I have apartments, and just to be honest, the visual on the backside of my house is not why I like my house. The front of my house is why I like the visual of the front.
Right, right.
So since I can't encroach, I'm only proposing that I want to make my front lower porch the same that the side walls of the steps moving up to my front of my property are. So and since that is shorter, I would like it to be larger above so that we can have an area above to enjoy, because down below that porch area is unfortunately not going to be that accessible for entertaining and stuff.
Right, it's going to only be 5 feet wide,
Correct.
and that's to the outer edge of the boards.
Correct, correct.
So again, so to put a roof, though, over that entryway, do you have any plans for that? or-
No, I do not.
And you chose not to do that because it'd be more difficult to tie it into the work that you would like to do on the second floor of the second deck?
Correct, correct. And more so from a safety and design standpoint. Now that deck above would have to extend further out due to that structure, or I would have to find a way to drain appropriately and aesthetically make that overhang below the bottom deck look appropriate.
Okay. All
So
right, thank you.
I eliminated that in my design. I would love to have an overhang, but I just felt due to the 5 foot, it wouldn't look appropriate with what I have above.
So aesthetically also, having a roof over a 5-foot deep deck would not look
With what
good, you're
I'm
saying, with what
proposing
you're
above.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner
And,
Miller.
sorry, the last thing to add too is just, that I've sampled a lot of other homes in town that have different design aesthetics to what I'm considering. I take great pride in loving seeing other homes in town, and I couldn't really see any designs that would be similar to mine.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. What materials would you use to build your deck as well as the stairs?
The steps, as of right now, I'm looking at a resin-based grate system that would allow me to actually put permeable pavers as the deck floor. And then as far as, because before I took out the steps, I had a cement sidewalk leading up to the home, and everybody and anybody who walked past our home when we first moved in noticed and told us, you get a lot of water on the front of your property, and the cement broke over time because it sunk in due to water just collapsing that cement paving, walking up to that front porch. So we are planning on doing 10 to 12-foot pillars to support that porch structure, just due to me knowing how much water is passing through my property, whether it be from rainfall or on the property itself.
So you're not just moving the cement steps forward and building a deck, in front of a deck? You're using permeable surfaces and materials in your project?
Permeable surface in my yes.
Correct.
We considered using composite decking, which would have slats to let the water go through, but my hopes and plans are is instead of doing another, because we've eliminated that cement sidewalk that leads up to our house because of the sewer and water line that we did, we're now planning on doing permeable pavers up to said deck, and then my hope is to allow the deck to be the same surface material as what we'd have leading up to this said deck.
And I noticed on your diagrams that, are you still planning on building a deck in the back of the home on the second floor?
Yeah, thank you, actually. That's the other part I want to actually mention to my case is that these aren't plans that are done yet. If you're looking at the rear elevation and potentially side elevations, I plan on proposing much more as far as what I would like to do with my home, and obviously that would be me coming back and having more conversations like this.
I guess I have a general question. For the purposes of our discussion today, are we just talking about the first floor deck in the front and the second floor deck in the front?
That's correct.
Nothing in the back?
That's correct. And just a note for the Planning Commission, Commissioner Meller, you mentioned, why wouldn't you have a, roof, or have you considered having a roof over? When Rodney and I were discussing the application, I was, trying to find some way in the code to maybe permit what he's proposing. Unfortunately, there is a section in the code that says under porches for permitted encroachments, and it says, in no case may a new unenclosed porch, including the eaves, be closer than 20 feet from the street lot line. In the face of his house is 20 feet from the property line, so he would have to meet that.
It's the same either way, you're saying, whether it was
Six
a
one, half
porch or a
dozen the
deck.
other.
Yeah.
I have an additional question. You moved into the home in 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
You did not make any modifications to the front of your house, did you?
None.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
I have just one question. I know you probably didn't enclose a porch, but is that one story in front of your house, is that formerly a porch that was enclosed at some point?
Yes, and I will say I made the adjustment of, I added a new door and windows to the front of said closed porch. So I apologize. I did make that adjustment, but no structural adjustments. The enclosed porch was there. I've tried to look back and seeing if that was modified or changed over the years. And again, the neighbors that live to the south are in actually a 3-flat, but it's one family that lives in the entire thing. And they've been there for 45 years on Groveland, so they've got a pretty good track record, and they even couldn't tell me the adjustments that were made by the previous family. So, but yes, it was an enclosed porch where, to be honest, it's not much of anything. It's pretty small, so that's our entryway.
So there's not a basement? built
Underneath
way?
that?
Yeah,
No.
okay. Because there's a window there, but that's just kind of a,
That would be part of
Access
the
to
base.
the-
Yeah, that would be part of the basement that you're looking into, but to the actual front porch, there is nothing below it.
on the front of the house, there appears to be a window under the enclosed porch. That's just an access to the crawl space under there?
What's above the window that you're looking at, it would be our living room. That's not the porch.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think what Commissioner Pelletier is asking is, do you think that the front part of the house used to be a porch that at some point was enclosed with walls. And
The
you
one-
may not know that.
Yes, with the windows, there's 4 windows?
Yep.
To clarify, so when you're looking at your house, there's the portion that's, you replaced the door on. And
Correct.
then next to it, towards the 3 flat, there's another section, and that was always enclosed, that there's basement under that.
Enclosed to, that's not a porch, that would be our front room.
Right.
Right,
That's, it's
okay.
front room, and then next to the front room, there was this formerly, some former porch that was then enclosed sometime in the past.
Correct.
And you're maintaining that window? Are you,
Maintaining which window?
the window under your living room that goes into the basement?
Yes,
Because it's
yeah.
going to have deck over it.
No, yeah, that I understand. And right now, our architectural drawings are showing it open, which, again, I didn't provide those photos, but I've also driven through town and seen people with front porch decks that show windows below. I haven't decided from an aesthetic if I would like to close off said area or keep it open as I've seen throughout town.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, at this time, anyone else who was sworn in and would like to speak on this application is welcome to approach the podium.
Or even if you're not sworn in, we'll swear you in.
All right, doesn't appear that we have anyone who would like to speak, so in that case, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Move on to the discussion, motion, and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Village Board regarding the request for variations set forth in item 6A1 above. I will propose that we discuss the 2 requests separately. The first request is for a variation from Section 10.7.3D, accessory structures and uses, and Section 10.7.4, permitted encroachments, to build a deck that would encroach 5 feet into the street yard. Does anyone like to start the discussion there?
As always, I feel like I'm having a hard time finding a hardship in this case, or identifying how it would be unique to only this property. So I understand that it's in a flood zone, and there are grading and drainage issues. I'm not sure how a front deck necessarily addresses that particular hardship. I mean, it's definitely a hardship to be in a floodplain. I'm just not seeing how a deck is alleviating that hardship. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
My thoughts are similar to Mr. Peltier's. Supporting the homeowner's desire to improve the property, but the deck in the front is, there's no hardship. I understand the need to address the code issue of a little bit more space and a landing for the stairs, but that's already accommodated within our code to build just a set of stairs. The deck really isn't. And we had long discussions a few years ago about porches and made accommodations within the code to allow, if your house was 20 feet back or at that limit, or sorry, within the limit, to split the difference and let some additional porch be built, but not deck. And I thought we discussed that fairly extensively at the time, which was additional porch was, we were amenable to, but not decks.
I think this is a difficult case. I agree, because just recently we changed the porch regulations, and I was not part of that decision, but I did listen to some of the village board meetings where that was discussed. Now, they had to draw a line somewhere, and they drew that line at a 20-foot front yard. And Mr. Cirillo has a 20-foot front yard, basically. And the regulations for porches say that, or decks, that if you have a 20-foot front yard, you cannot further encroach even with an unenclosed porch, even though a lot of the trustees at the time were allowing new unenclosed porches to encroach into a larger front yard because they wanted to have people out on their front porches, out in front of their house, have it more of a community feeling in Riverside, where people could see people walking by on the sidewalk and all of that. So the spirit of the regulation, I think, that porch ordinance was that it would allow what Mr. Cirillo would like to do. But the letter of the ordinance very much restricts us. I do see an argument here that your property is unique to the extent of the way the house was placed on the piece of property that close to the sidewalk. This was not an originally platted part of Riverside. This is not part of Olmsted's plan. There are no great, big, rolling green lawns along Groveland. I think all of that weighs in your favor. So I think I could hear an argument that for this variance, that the placement of the house on this lot, and it's a fairly small lot, creates something of a hardship. I would like to suggest one thing for consideration to the other commissioners and to the board when they consider this, is that I think what could be appropriate to allow Mr. Cirillo to do is to have the front step and stoops with a large platform outside of the front door that certainly would wrap around the side of the house, because you are allowed to have a deck on the side of your house, and steps down. I believe that would be within the 5-foot side yard, and perhaps extend over partway past what would that be, the north side of the front door. I think that would be a very reasonable accommodation, but as of right now, I am having a little difficulty approving the full width of the deck as proposed. And I should just say, I don't see a significant difference between this being a deck and a porch. I think whether or not it has a roof over it, when I think of a deck, I think of a big wooden structure, that's kind of like a big open space and all the rest. That's what I think of as a deck. This is basically a porch. So the fact that it doesn't have a roof over it, to me, does not prevent my considering it to be allowable. I think that's a distinction without a significant difference. It would still serve as a sitting area, as a social area, as a welcoming part of the house.
I have a question. Would a variance be necessary if the petitioner was building a porch as opposed to a deck?
Yeah.
It
Yes.
still would? Oh.
Because of the depth of the
Yeah.
front yard.
See, I believe that the house goes right up to the street yard setback, correct? So the stairs would be a variance anyway. And the code allows stairs to be built if it goes into the street yard. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And I believe that these old stairs did not have a landing, but the landing is required pursuant to code now. So how big can we make a landing, I guess, is
I'm not trying to extend my landing more than what was originally provided by my steps. So I'm willing to work within the zoning code of keeping my landing at the same depth the steps were. And steps can't encroach into the street yard. So what I'm proposing is said front step porch area would be the same that I already had there to begin with. Arguably better, more efficient, and safer than what I previously had there from my house that was built in 1923. Furthermore, I'm not encroaching to the left or right of my house, the north or the south. The only way I can get there, though, is by allowing a porch to extend to said areas to provide the appropriate access to north and south. I've had sleepless nights over this. I really, really would like for you to consider that what I'm asking of is not a stretch.
Linda, do you have any other thoughts?
I think that the way the house is situated, the fact that it's in a flood zone, the fact that the petitioner is working towards remediating some of his concerns, I think that we should have a discussion to perhaps consider allowing this.
Thank you. I had some similar struggles with Commissioner Pelletier and Commissioner Marhol regarding the issue of a hardship for the proposed street yard encroachments. Looking along Groveland, the other homes along the block, I didn't see any that really appeared to have similar encroachments. They seem to be all at or around that 20-foot setback line. So I'd be a little concerned about setting a precedent here if we were to allow a variation in this case. That said, is there anyone who is prepared to make a motion at this point?
May I just add one thing? I
Sure.
didn't provide pictures, and I apologize, but there are certain homes on my street that have front porches that are closer to said street setback. So I apologize for not providing those pictures and information, but I would like to note to the committee that there are actually homes that are closer than my property from what I plan on building and designing.
I did see that as well, but are they porches or are they
Yes.
actually part of the houses?
No, they're front porches.
I think there are a couple.
There's
There's not all of them.
There's
3 I can think of.
There's 2 photos in the packet, one that looks north and one that looks south.
The photos that I provided, maybe I did provide X. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, those were just going up and down the street. Then I can't remember that I provided those.
To a previous point, I am very concerned about the precedent setting that we're potentially engaging in here.
I'd like to say something to the point of precedent setting. I have to say that on Groveland in particular, where you have a series of houses very close to the sidewalk, I would not necessarily see myself this being a bad precedent to revitalize that street a little bit using the existing housing stock. We just approved these TOD-oriented zoning changes to allow people in Groveland and that entire district to build up if they choose to, in order to, in part, I think, revitalize this area. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have people allow people to encroach into their short street, front street yards there with some kind of a sitting area.
I don't think we're debating the desire of improving properties or enabling higher best use, but we have been historically very protective of the front space of every property. And that, I think, without a hardship, being that this would apply to multiple properties, not only on Groveland, but throughout basically every street where the houses are on smaller lots, does not make this a unique situation.
Even though this property is in a flood zone and not every single home in Riverside is in a flood zone?
The desire to, no, it does not apply. The flood zone is entirely, I understand that the flood zone makes it harder to build and potentially makes the ground settle, but that doesn't justify extending into the front yard.
I have neighbors that live on my block that would beg to differ. And I've already experienced
Mr.
pumping
Cirillo,
water. I'm
the
sorry.
public hearing's closed.
I'm
This is
sorry.
the
I apologize.
Planning and Zoning Commission's time to talk among
First
themselves.
time here, I apologize.
That's
Sorry.
all right.
I agree with Joel just to the extent that being in a floodplain is clearly a hardship. I don't see how a deck or porch in the front yard setback alleviates that hardship at all. It makes the property unique, but it doesn't relate to the variance that we're hearing tonight. That's my concern.
Would anyone be able to make a motion either in favor of or against the front yard or the first floor deck?
I move that we recommend denial of the variance for the first floor deck.
Is there a second?
Second.
Do we go through the points of the very?
Yes, we'll go through the standards in just a minute. So there are several standards that need to be met for any variation, and I'll go through those. One, because of a particular physical or other unusual condition of the specific property involved, a particular hardship or practical difficulty to the owner would result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. Do we feel that that standard has been met?
I do not believe so. I think this is, if we look at the photos, the placement of the home on the lot is fairly typical of the rest of Groveland, and I would say other, as I noted, smaller lots within town.
I would beg to differ for reasons I previously stated.
All right, the purpose of the variation is not based primarily upon a desire to increase financial gain.
That's true.
That's true.
Agrees. I think this is not.
The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property.
That's true.
I think it's true.
The conditions upon which the petition for variation is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same zoning classification.
That's not true.
I agree.
Well, I think it's questionable, because we're only talking about R3 and R4. We're not talking about all residences in Riverside and a lot of the properties. And the R3 and R4 are not single-family homes, and some of them have larger street yards, so I'm a little bit on the fence about that criteria.
Okay. The granting of the variation would not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located.
I would agree with that.
The granting of the variation would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
Yes, it would not.
I think we're debating that.
And the proposed variation will not impair an adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property or substantially increase the congestion of the public streets or increase the danger of fire or impair natural drainage or create drainage problems on adjacent properties or endanger the public safety or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood.
That's correct.
I agree.
I think that's met, yes.
Now, for the commission to recommend approval of a variation, all 7 standards would need to be met. So the motion on the table is to recommend denial of this first variation request. Is there any further discussion? And could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Pelletier?
Yes. So just
A
to
ye- a
clarify, a
yes
yes
is a
is a recommendation.
vote for denial.
Commissioner Marhol?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Braun?
No.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Yes. The motion to recommend denial passes. Moving on to the second request for a variation from section 1073D, accessory structures and uses, to build a deck on the second story of the house. Would anyone like to begin the discussion there?
In this case, the petitioner has provided a number of examples where decks were constructed above a first floor extension. I'm not sure what code they were approved under, but there's certainly examples throughout the village and probably throughout this particular zoning classification where we do have second floor decks.
I'd be curious to know, actually, 'cause with some of the fence variations that we've discussed, other examples of the encroachments were presented to us and were not considered because they were, previous to, or they had been granted a variance. So I'm not sure that the fact that there are other instances of this in the village is necessarily relevant, but one of them is, I don't recall coming before planning and zoning, and I've been here for a long time. So I'm curious to know what, how that, I guess it's a balcony.
It's a balcony.
Thank you.
However,
There
there
it
is one that was built last year, and I think it was a mistake. There is a second floor porch on the new house on Long Common, which would not have been allowed as far as I know, but somehow it got passed. It never came in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a variance, so I'm guessing it was a mistake.
Actually, if we're gonna continue this, there's also one, and I can't read the address, but it looks like it's 103 or 203, and I think it's Herbert. It was newly constructed as well. It was a rehab with the blue addition on the top.
It's difficult to tell from the photos, because you have, some are porches, some are balconies, some are decks. It's hard to say whether they're in the front setback in the street yard or if they're not within the street yard. So it's kind of hard to say from those.
Well, for me, how I see this in part is that the second floor deck is not encroaching anywhere into any yard. It's going to be within the footprint of the existing house. It looks to me like it would be, if this was a balcony, it would be allowed. It's not a balcony because he's using the structure down below. So I don't see a significant difference. So I would be in favor of granting this variation for that reason.
I guess I feel like that we shouldn't be granting variations for things that we think should be allowed. We should be considering a change in the zoning ordinance.
I'll say we can do both.
Not tonight.
True.
So yes, we can do both. I agree.
Well, I think typically what's happened is if we get two requests within a short amount of time, like for the fences, right, then the board considers making a text amendment, so.
Does that then become on the Planning and Zoning Committee, and I'm looking to temporary chairperson Hennigan as well as village attorney, does that then become an item of the Planning and Zoning Committee's to-do list?
Yes, I would say so, that we would look at regulations for these sorts of structures, whatever it is that we want to call them.
Decks on top of first floors.
Right.
Terraces is one word I saw.
Terrace, yeah.
Terraces. Rooftop terraces or whatever.
So the issue is that this is a deck and not a balcony because it doesn't cantilever off of the structure, but rather sits on the first floor structure. And decks are not allowed above the first floor, right? According to our zoning ordinance.
Right, decks are not allowed above the first floor. I'm not sure that the proposed structure really meets the definition of a deck, as it is sitting on top of the first floor of a home. It's not a raised platform,
Yeah.
as the definition requires. So I don't think the zoning ordinance really fits this structure as well. So in my opinion, I think the ordinance itself is causing a hardship here.
Are you suggesting that it's more of a balcony that he's building and not a deck?
I don't know that it's a balcony or a deck as defined by the ordinance. It's something that I can't quite quantify or define. And as such, I think that's really more of an issue with the code than it is an issue with specifically what they're proposing to construct here. Any other discussion?
I do have a question. If there was a roof over it, what would it be?
I think it becomes a porch.
A second
Second floor
Second story
porch.
porch.
I'm just wondering, just curious.
Yeah, I do think this bears some
Well,
further discussion.
Except that it wouldn't be a porch, because a porch has to have access from the outside. It has to provide access into the building, so it couldn't be a porch.
Providing direct access, so it need to have
Yeah.
stairs coming off of it.
Yes, so it couldn't be a porch, it would be a covered terrace or something.
Okay.
The definition of a porch specifies it's a single-story roof structure.
Okay. Well, this would be a single story, it just wouldn't be on the bottom floor. One
Fair
story.
enough.
So, anyway.
All right, any further discussion? Is anyone prepared to make a motion?
I move to allow the second variation that we're considering for the second floor deck structure
Terrace.
terrace at this property, 95 Groveland Avenue.
Second.
All right, now we'll go through the standards for variation.
I would just want to
Yes.
specify that it's the front of the house. We're only talking again about the front of the house, not the.
Yes.
Okay.
Because of a particular physical or other unusual condition of the specific property involved, a particular hardship or practical difficulty to the owner would result as distinguished from mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out.
I have the same problem here that I did on the first one, is just not seeing a hardship. I don't think lack of clarity in the ordinance can be used as a hardship. It certainly wouldn't be unique to this property.
Well, one of the things I would say again is that balcony would be allowed for the structure, but it cannot. I'm going to make a leap of judgment here that it could not be built on this house without significant structural support and all the rest. And so, since a balcony is allowed, that under the ordinance, under our zoning ordinance, I would consider this the same as a balcony. So that's how I look at it. So that might not be quite getting to the issue of hardship, I agree, but I think it would be a hardship to require the applicant to try and explain that complex regulatory satisfaction. How's that?
I can get on board with that analysis. And
And So then are we really granting a variance? We're defining this as a porch and not a deck? I mean, really, because what it doesn't
No,
meet
you're defining
it would be a balcony,
You mean?
not a.
Yeah, we're calling this a balcony, not a deck.
I'm not
Because it's
sure.
not a deck either, by definition.
Well, we would be still considering a variation for a deck as the code is currently written. But I think we're all in agreement that the code as currently written doesn't address this structure very well,
Okay.
which
I
is what
guess,
we'd like to look at.
so what was the definition of a deck again?
Sure. It's a structure without roof or walls, attached to a principal building and designed as a raised platform and connected by structural supports at grade or by the building structure.
Could you also read porch and then also read balcony?
Of course.
Thank you.
Let me do balcony because it's closer in the alphabet. Balcony is a platform which projects from the exterior wall of the building above the ground, exposed to the open air, and has direct access to the interior of a building, and is not supported by posts or columns extending to the ground.
Can't this be a balcony? I'm not-
Well, could I ask our lawyer to, if he has anything to say on this point, if we have a structure that we're not sure is covered by our zoning ordinance? How should we address it?
So if you decide it's not covered, I mean, it should be addressed through a text amendment, right? I did feel, and staff feels it met the definition of a deck, correct?
It's about as close as
Yeah.
the most appropriate
So
definition.
sometimes when things aren't an exact fit, they have to make the best call they can. And I think the balcony issue was that it is supported by the structure itself.
Right.
So it's before you as a deck. you can certainly send along your recommendation to the board that you consider text amendments to address this kind of situation, but in the meantime, this is your recommendation on this particular thing.
To support staff's assessment, it's not a balcony. It does not extend from the structure.
Correct.
Without underlying things.
Right.
This is clearly on top of a first floor piece of the house.
And a porch is defined as a single-story roofed structure which can be enclosed or unenclosed, attached to the outside of a building, and providing direct access to a building.
So I guess I would get back to the structure and what the petitioner would like to do here creates the hardship in this case. That's what I would argue as far as meeting that criteria.
Could you repeat that?
The existence of the structure, particularly with the first floor sort of protrusion there, and the desire of the petitioner to build something that won't further encroach into any of the street yards without unnecessarily expending time trying to create some kind of a balcony structure, all of that militates towards that this is a hardship, that what he wants to do is the most efficient way to achieving what should be allowed under our code because there's no encroachment whatsoever.
Thank you.
All right, so the purpose of the variation is not based primarily upon a desire to increase financial gain.
That's true.
Correct.
The alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property.
Yes.
The conditions upon which the petition for variation is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same zoning classification.
Yes.
I think that there's probably a lot of houses that have this kind of enclosed, first, a single-story protrusion on the front, and therefore it would apply to many,
Okay.
many homes, I think.
Split on that one, that's fine. The granting of the variation would not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located.
It's true.
That's true. Yes.
The granting of the variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
That's true.
True.
The proposed variation will not impair an adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property or substantially increase the congestion of the public streets, or increase the danger of fire, or impair natural drainage, or create drainage problems on adjacent properties, or endanger the public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood.
It's true.
So to recommend approval of a variation, all 7 standards must be met. The motion on the table is to recommend approval of the variation request. Is there any further discussion? Ann, could you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Pelletier?
No, but I would like to qualify that I don't think it's appropriate to grant a variation because I don't believe hardship has been met, and I believe that this is generally applicable to other homes. However, that is not to say that I don't think the homeowner should be allowed to construct this. I think it is an issue with our ordinance and the definition of various structures.
Commissioner Marhol?
No, with the same exact caveats that Commissioner Peltier noted.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Braun?
Yes.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Yes.
Okay,
And so-
Mr. Cirillo, this is a recommending body, so the village board has the final say, and staff will let you know when it's going to be considered by them.
Thank you.
Be on the April 6th agenda.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Given that we have a number of people in the audience, can I take things out of order here?
As long as nobody on the commission objects.
No objection.
No objection.
All right, I would like our next item to be PZ 230002, 61 Woodside Road, the Central Hauser variations.
Temporary Commissioner Chair Hennigan, I need to excuse myself.
Thank you, Commissioner Marhol, understood.
And just for the record, the reason Commissioner Marhol is stepping down is because he is a school board member.
All right, this item starts on page 62 in the electronic packet for anyone following along. This is a public hearing to consider an application for variations from Section 10.7.3, accessory structures and uses, Section 10.7.4, permitted encroachments, Section 10.8.9, required off-street parking spaces, Section 10.9.5, perimeter parking lot landscaping, and Section 10.9.6, interior parking lot landscaping of the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance to install a 4-foot-tall black wrought iron style fence that encroaches into the Akenside Road street yard for a length of approximately 189 feet along Akenside Road, to install 2 4-foot-tall black wrought iron style fences that encroach into the Akenside Road street yard for lengths of approximately 183 feet and 173 feet perpendicular to Akenside Road, to install a 20-foot-tall PVC-coated chain-link backstop fence that encroaches approximately 21 feet into the Akenside Road street yard, approximately 167 feet from the street, to build an approximately 282-square-foot refuse enclosure within the Akenside Road street yard, approximately 150 feet from the street, to install a 10-foot-wide sidewalk instead of the maximum 5-foot-wide sidewalk perpendicular to Akenside Road that encroaches into the street yard for a length of approximately 188 feet, to build a parking lot with 187 spaces instead of the required 114 spaces, to allow the perimeter parking lot landscape buffer from Akenside Road to be less than 10 feet wide near 2 parking spaces, to install 12 interior landscape medians instead of the required 17 mediums for the proposed 87 parking spaces, and to install 8 interior landscape medians that are smaller than required. The petitioner in this case is School District 96. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The notice of the public hearing was published in the Landmark on March 1st, 2023, and will be marked as an exhibit. The remaining application materials will be marked as a second exhibit. Is there a motion to accept these exhibits?
I make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, anyone who plans to give testimony on this case, please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear that the testimony you will give is true to the best of your knowledge?
This is general public comment?
Yes, that's,
Yeah, okay,
yep,
yes.
anything, yes. If so, say I do.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And please read the memo.
Oh, thank you. So just for clarification, for the benefit of our visitors, we have 2 items on the agenda today regarding the Central Hauser project. We are now in a public hearing for the variations, and those variations I'm going to describe shortly. So if you're welcome to comment on either of them when you approach the podium. Please state your name and give your address, but we'll consider the variations first. And as you heard during the last presentation, the commission is a recommending body to the village board. So the commission will make recommendations on these requests to the village board, which will consider the recommendations during their April 3rd meeting. So if you'd like to follow that process, please visit the village website. The second item on the agenda, which we're not currently in, is a general discussion of the site plan and the changes. So first, we'll consider very specific elements of the site plan, and then we'll consider the site plan generally. So if you have general comments about the site plan, you may want to save when you speak for that portion, and that's the next item on our agenda. In this case, the commission is the deciding body on the site plan. Now, the commission can recommend approval with conditions, or recommend denial of the site plan, and I'll describe that further. But hopefully that's clarifying. I know it's a little bit of a wonky process, but this is the consideration of the variations. So in consideration of the variations, there are different sections. First is the request for variations for fences. And so the petitioner is requesting a 4-foot-tall black wrought iron style fence that are along Akenside Road. And then there are the black PVC-coated chain-link backstop fence, and then another fence that runs along the recreational field. And I'm just going to give you a general overview, and then the petitioners will further describe their requests. What the zoning ordinance states is that because there is a street yard from Akenside Road, you can't have fences normally encroach in Akenside Road. So they would have to request variations for those fences. The second request is for the refuse enclosure that's going to be in the parking lot. And again, normally you couldn't have a refuse enclosure in a street yard, so they're applying for a variation to allow that. The third category of requests is for the sidewalk. The renovations to the site would include installing a 10-foot wide sidewalk that runs perpendicular to Akenside, from Akenside down in, past the recreational field, past the parking lot. Normally, that could only be 5 feet wide, so they're requesting that be 10 feet wide. The other request is to redevelop the parking lot with 87 parking spaces. Currently, there are 77 parking spaces on site. They're proposing 87 parking spaces. Per the code, they should have 114 parking spaces. So that reduction in the number of required parking spaces is why they're applying for a variation. The next set has to do with the landscape medians for the parking lot. The code requires a 10-foot wide landscape median between the parking lot itself, just the parking lot, and Akenside Road. And so that'll be slightly less than 10 feet in a couple areas. It's mostly 10 feet, but there are a couple areas where it's a little bit less than 10 feet. The code also requires 17 landscape medians for the proposed 87 parking spaces. And so the petitioner is proposing to install 12 interior landscape medians instead of 17. And of those landscape medians, 8 of them are smaller than what's required. So the requirement is to have an 8-foot wide, 18-foot long landscape median for each median. And so 8 of those medians will be smaller than required. So those are the considerations for the variation specifically, and I'll hand it over to Ryan and the team from District 96 to fully describe them.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Kelly. I'm with the LA Architects. We are the architect of record for Riverside School District 96. We've had the benefit of meeting with the commission previously, gotten some preliminary feedback. So I'll talk through a little bit about the site plan in general, and then I'd like to talk through some graphics and illustrations about the variations that we're requesting. We've long been working with the district to separate parking and play at all of the schools throughout the district. We've done that at other schools, Ames and Hollywood, which is Brookfield, but now looking at Central Elementary School and Hauser Junior High School, we're looking at that same issue. So it's an issue with lack of play space. So what we're doing here is we are looking to redevelop the existing parking lot, which is essentially in the same location. Right now we have 77 parking spaces. As Ann mentioned, village ordinance requires 114 parking spaces. So we're increasing that number by 10. With this, we also want to provide more play space. So we are looking to redevelop the existing footprint of the recreation field and widen that, or lengthen it actually, a little bit. And then also incorporate an elementary school focused playground just to the west of that. And in doing so, we want to create some safe boundaries. So I'm going to go through a few variations. So we'll start here with the refuge enclosure. So given, and to maybe back up a little bit, the hardship that we are dealing with, given the through-lot configuration of the site, really we end up with 2 street yards, one on Woodside and then one on Akenside. So really any development that we do or improvements that we would look to do would be an encroachment into that street yard. So that is something to consider. First here, the refuge enclosure. We're looking to create an aesthetically pleasing enclosure out of brick, similar to the existing building. We wanted to move that as far away from Akenside as possible. So right now it's located 150 feet from the property line. And it's really the closest spot that would allow circulation for the garbage truck to come service it, and then also to be away from students as well. Here, I already touched on this. We're looking for, or asking for a variation for the number of parking spaces. We are, again, increasing the number that we have from existing, but again, looking to balance that between play space and number of parking spaces. So some preliminary feedback that we received from the commission was that in order to do that, we really wanted to minimize some of the hardscape. Previously, we had a sidewalk going through the middle of the parking lot, as Jason's pointed out here. We've eliminated that, provided more green space, and consolidated that parking lot. Well, I'll point out here as well is this is an important feature, the sidewalk running from Akenside toward the school. We see that as kind of a bicycle pedestrian thoroughfare. There's lots of kids that come from the Akenside neighborhoods. So we wanted to create a safe path for kids to come into and through the site. So that sidewalk, I think previously we had at 16 feet. I think we've received some feedback that, maybe if we could, narrow that a little bit, it might be more in keeping with some intent of the ordinances. So right now you're seeing that as a 10-foot sidewalk, but still technically within the street yard of Akenside. Move on here. Again, balancing the need for parking, the village ordinance, and the requirement for the interior landscape islands. Right now, we're providing 12. We have consolidated four of the islands here and across here. Part of what we discussed at our last meeting was that the minimum island doesn't really allow for a shade tree to be healthy and to grow. So what we've done is consolidate some of those islands at your suggestion. And so, this allows us to, again, increase parking a little bit, but still provide those green space buffers. As Ann mentioned, here at Akenside, we're required to have that 10-foot buffer between Akenside and the parking lot, also between the property line to the south. We're a little bit constrained there with providing the safe passage, again, with that sidewalk coming from Akenside to Central Elementary School, which is located here. So what we're providing, and we'll talk about in a minute, was we're providing quite a lot of shrubbery and greenery along that to provide screening between the church next to it and the parking lot. So fencing we've discussed, we know that 4-foot fencing is what is allowed. No fencing is allowed within the street yard. We were previously showing some more fencing than we are now, but in discussions with the school board, we feel that, again, that safe separation of parking and play is important. And so we reduced it just to where the red line is, Jason's pointing, to include that 4-foot wrought iron fence, historic looking and keeping in character with the neighborhood and with the village, but still keeping a safe separation, primarily for balls. I mean, obviously you could hit a ball over 4 feet, but balls, running into the parking lot or running into Akenside Road. Additionally, the chain link PVC coated backstop fencing would be, just to serve the baseball diamond. There are 2 existing. We would only propose to put back 1, and that again is technically within the street yard. And these are just a few details that talk about the types of enclosure. As I mentioned, brick, similar to the existing building, wrought iron style fencing. And I think those are all in your packet. We could talk a little bit about, I'm happy to answer questions. We have some landscape plans that we'd like to share, as well as some civil plans that talk about pervious and impervious surfaces.
Jason Green, WT Group. Need my address for okay. Civil engineer. What you have here is an exhibit depicting the existing condition of the site. In general, in all of these exhibits, green is going to be grass, and red is going to be impervious areas. So as you can see, the existing site is more than half impervious. Next exhibit. In the next exhibit, you're going to see a new color pop up, blue. So blue depicts generally permeable surfaces. So there's a variety of permeable surfaces here. There's start maybe in the parking lot. Yeah, that's good. That's permeable pavers, and then there's permeable wood chip playground surfacing. There's permeable concrete, which is where the basketball courts are proposed. And these surfaces all allow the water to drain through them, and we'll have stone below, which cleans the water, so that process scrubs the water and reduces runoff, of course, because it's infiltrating through. So we've used that. Keep that exhibit for one more second. We've used those surfaces, so we strategically have included enough to provide the amount of pervious area that's required by code. So one thing I just want to point out before we flip to the next slide is the size of the permeable pavers in the parking lot, because you might notice a difference on the next exhibit. All right, thank you. It's over double the size in this exhibit. Reason being, in this case, we have a synthetic turf play field instead of natural grass. So in order to account for that imperviousness of that synthetic turf, we've accounted for it by drastically expanding the permeable paver section. The other permeable surfaces remain the same, so wood chips, concrete, etc. Yeah, you can go. So in the existing condition, 75% of the grass field and approximately 10 to 15% of the east parking lot sheet drain into Akenside Road. So sheet drainage means that the water just lands on the surface and runs off above grade into the street. This adds to flooding conditions, and surface water obviously will impede traffic and the like. There are 2 storm sewers that currently drain the east parking lot, and there's 2 connections. So there's a series of manholes and pipes, and they connect into the storm sewer in Akenside, and the rest of the parking lot, so 85% of the parking lot and 25% of the playfield, drain to those pipes. We investigated those pipes extensively with televising, jetting, cleaning, and we found that a lot of those pipes are old, coming apart. The joints are leaking, and this could inadvertently be allowing groundwater to drain into the pipes and go to the storm sewer, which adds to potential flooding problems. So one of our primary objectives with the design is to replace all the pipes with new watertight joints that will stop that from happening. I should mention also, when you have a bad joint in a pipe, soil can also get in there, and that grit can actually damage your storm sewer systems and end up in the waterways. So I think it's important that we rectify that as part of the project. In the proposed condition, we are proposing to, you can keep that exhibit, that's fine. Yeah. In the proposed condition, we're proposing to collect all the runoff from the site with storm sewers and convey it to water quality devices. And these devices will be gravel pits below grade, which will drain the water into, and as the water again flows through that gravel, it gets scrubbed and cleaned. And then after it exits that gravel, it'll enter a stormwater vault. So right now we have a vault. I'll show them. Right here. Yeah, it's not really well depicted there. But It's a vault below the parking lot, which is designed to hold just over 90,000 cubic feet of water. And because we're holding this water, we're able to slowly release water from it. We can hold the water long enough that we can reduce the outflow to a trickle. The existing flow rate to Akenside is 20 cubic feet per second. I don't know if you can envision that. It's kind of an odd measurement that we use. We're actually going to reduce that to 1 cubic feet per second, so 95% reduction in the peak runoff. And that's the only reason we can do that is because we're storing that water so we can slowly release it. Yeah, why don't you start with the next? Yeah, that's good. Got some circulation plans here. So this is these are some plans that we used, some software we have for proving that the fire trucks can access the site. So this exhibit depicts the fire truck coming in off of Akenside on the north driveway, looping around the front of the drop-off area, and then backing out and leaving through the south drive. Next thing, oh, and there's also this radius shown of the fire coverage, 300 feet, which is the hose length that shows the coverage of the building. This is another exhibit showing the fire truck entering at the north drive and then turning down the angled walk between the school and the playfield so that he can jockey around, get into that spot in order to cover that end of the building. Again, with the 300-foot radius. And then the third exhibit is coming off of Woodside, off of the existing drive, in the general area of the existing drive on the north side of the school. Enters in, and then from that point can fight fires with that 300-foot radius. So serves the rest of the school. We didn't depict it in an exhibit, but the rest of the west side of the school can be served from Woodside. And then the final exhibit is just a trash enclosure, a trash pickup diagram showing the garbage truck coming in off of the north drive, turning, loading from the dumpster, backing up, and then turning left and leaving. Before I turn it over to landscape, I just want to point out that last time I was asked by a commissioner to look at not only pervious, impervious, and when I'm accounting for pervious, accounting for the permeable pavers, everything else. But we were asked to look at grass versus grass. So existing grass, proposed grass. So we've done that. We didn't forget about it. And we have determined that we're actually increasing the amount of grass by just under 3% with the natural grass option. Of course, with the synthetic turf option, we're not going to improve it. It's going to be quite a bit less. It's 53% reduction in grass, comparing existing to proposed. So I'll turn it over to landscape. Paul Couture.
Good evening, Paul Couture. I'm the project landscape architect. As with all our, common with all our designs, the goal is to have the end result be as natural as possible, but also to have something interesting going on all year long. With this layout, we have plants flowering from early spring well into fall. We have incorporated plants with interesting leaf color, texture, berries, interesting bark, branching habit. The majority of our plant selection also will have brilliant fall color. We have, excuse me, arborvitae and yews to add evergreen balance through the fall and the winter. We have completely filled all the green space that is available with live plant material. So along with all the trees and shrubs, the bed areas are carpeted with perennials and live ground cover. We address the green space east of the ball field along Atkinson Road by using trees and large type shrubs as well as understory shrubs and perennials to soften the view from across the street. We've also addressed the buffer yard on the south parking lot along the passer's residence by using a combination of walls of columnar evergreens, large shrubs, and ornamental grasses. Overall, this project will include some 26 shade and ornamental trees, 90 upright evergreen and lower growing evergreen shrubs, 195 flowering shrubs, close to 700 ground cover, and 535 perennial flowers and ornamental grasses. Excuse me. Our plant selection is a combination of natives, plant selections from Chicagoland Grows, as well as from the Proven Winners collection. All plant material is specified to be Northern Illinois grown. I do have some pictures of the different plants. These are the trees and some of the evergreens that are proposed, and showing the tree itself in some fall color. This is the evergreen screen along the pastor's house. I have them in a couple rows. It's not just a straight line, but they're in a couple sections. These are different shrubs that we have growing, showing their fall color and flowers. And again, when I'm saying things are going to be fun, things are going to be turning on and off, so it's not, this doesn't all happen at once. Otherwise, it would make you dizzy. These are our perennials. Oops, I'm sorry. But again, you can see the lot of color throughout the year. Again, even with in the summer, without the fall color, just interesting leaf color, all through. Again, ornamental grasses. What we also do too is when we're selecting the perennials, we're looking for plants that are going to flower the longest, and also when they're not in flower, that they just don't look like dead weeds, so they actually aren't not distracting from other parts of the landscape. So again, with the all the spaces, we have them as full as can be with plant material. And again, trying to get those buffers as full as possible also to help the view. Thanks, and I'll take any questions too.
Can I add something?
Just a minute. First, we'll have the commissioners ask.
Could I ask just if you could point with a pointer or something where some of the landscaping will be on the south edge of the property, and then adjacent to the ball field? Because I don't think I have the right map in front of me or diagram in front of me.
They're along the ball field here. There's existing vegetation, and the fence that's remaining as is. So it's pretty heavily full of plant material now. But here's south here. We've got our starting out with some Hicks yews, going into a row of evergreen arborvitae to limelight hydrangea, which gets fairly large. Some more right in front of the door or the opening of the house. I've got a solid row of evergreen there as well. Switchgrass, 4 to 6 feet, and then a little blue stem. The space is starting to narrow, so I have to watch what we're being able to put in there. But basically, this whole row is tight with plant material and of some height as well too. Yeah, Back in here, again, I know there, with the construction, there was some concerns that the lilacs, which some of them are, I mean, they're, have seen better days, but again, they're there, but with construction, they'd be coming out. So what I try to do is work in a couple newer varieties of lilac that'll, again, that flower longer at different times, not all first thing in spring, but a couple different times. And they're resistant to powdery mildew, which most of the other, older lilacs are. But I've got, again, in here I've got Miss Kim lilac here, Charles Jolie lilac here, some more Miss Kims. And then on the sides here, these are Viburnum lantana, Mohican viburnum. So all these plants are gonna, be in the 6 to 8 foot range as they grow. So that's the backdrop, and I also have some switchgrass here as well too. The space opens up here a little more, so I've got a little more room. So I worked in 3 columnar type trees. These are Acer rubrum. Again, nice fall color. The variety is called Armstrong. And eventually those canopies will just kind of grow together. But again, I'm just trying to create a nice soft wall there to soften up this view. In front, the space in front, I've got some IKEA, got some hosses, because this area will probably end up being a little more shaded. So I've got some lower plantings in there too. So again, no grass, solid plant material. These are the existing trees that are there now. Got a locust, bald cypress. I think we have a hackberry and a couple of Kentucky coffee tree, which I actually try to, for some continuity, I try to pull some of those in too. So I've got Kentucky coffee tree in here. I've got some hackberry in there as well. And then I've got some bald cypress in here, and then east side of the island. So just trying to pull things together with what's in the street right now.
So what will be in the green area bordering the parking lot then, facing Akenside?
Over here?
Yeah, that whole stretch there.
Okay, so I've got
You have to
some-
name all, but just trees or
What's that?
shrubs, trees or shrubs or,
Oh, we've got
perennials or?
I've got a combination of everything here. I've got
Okay.
the free bald cypress, we've got flowering shrubs, I've got evergreens in there, they're Taunton yews, because, we're looking for something that's gonna get in the 3 foot, 3.5 foot range. The Taunton yews, they do not require a lot of maintenance, and that's what they'll top out at. So, again, so we don't have all sticks out there in the winter. We've got a balance of evergreen in there as well too. Underneath the bald cypress, I have beds of ground cover, and then pockets of perennial flowers as well from both sides. I've got perennial flowers in the front side as well too. So, again, a lot of color in here.
That
And again,
sounds
not
nice.
all at once though.
And what is your opinion about the thriving of all these plants? And
I'm sorry?
What is your opinion about whether these plants will be thriving unless they have regular care in 5 or 10 or 15 years?
Well, the thing is, everything needs care and maintenance, and that's will be part of the program. Plus, again, the plants that we're using here, too, are, over the years, we've weeded out a lot of plants that the nurseries are saying, this is the greatest plant in history, just to find out that, 3 years later, it's a dud. So, we're using plant material that we know is tried and true and tough, and especially in areas like this, small islands, it always is tough, but it's very doable.
One last question for me. So on the south side, south border of the parking lot, yes, is that a walkway then, or is that plant
There's a
material? Is it
walkway,
both?
yeah, there's a walkway there's green space between the walkway and the property line.
Okay, so that's wide enough. It's
Yeah.
sufficiently wide to do that. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Do we have this plan in our packet?
I believe we do.
Okay, I couldn't find it. And Anna's saying no, so.
No.
Oh, we have a plant list.
We have
Oh, a plant.
native
Yeah,
plant
that
list.
plant list was just general, that's
Uh-huh.
like, we've narrowed that down to fit the plan now, but that was just a general list of things that we, have used in the past and use, but definitely not, all those plants aren't on this, but we do have quite a few.
Are you removing trees along Akenside?
I'm sorry?
Are you removing trees along
I
Akenside?
believe
at all?
there's one coming out due to construction.
That's on the school's property?
Yeah, it's on the
The
inside of
inside, yeah.
the public walk.
Okay. Do you know what is, the fence along Akenside? It's, gets very close to the property line at one point. Do you know what that minimum distance is? And then what's the distance to the sidewalk? I'm just wondering, is there enough room kind of between the fence and the sidewalk to provide the plantings?
Sure.
that
I mean, I
are being
can answer the
proposed?
first part of that. 5 foot off the sidewalk is the closest that it gets. We're a little bit further away as we move down to the south. And so Paul and I talked about how much space, knowing that we are going to impact those lilacs, that they, one, that they are getting toward the end of their life, two, that they wouldn't survive construction. Is that enough space to provide new lilacs and new plant material? So it is.
And how close is it to the property line, the fence?
The fence is like a foot from the property line, but 5 feet from the sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just one last question. You said so there's vegetation on the north, along that north fence line?
It's already there.
That's already there?
Correct.
But you're constructing a new sidewalk there?
No, yeah, that's.
Yes.
And how much room is there between the fence and the sidewalk? Is all of the vegetation on the residential side?
It is. Yeah, there's some that's grown into the fence.
Right.
And that's a big reason for leaving it. And
Yeah.
if we were to remove the fence or, try and replant it, it'd be many years before you'd see that same type of screening that exists today. I think at the closest dimension, we are 5 feet off the fence line, which is the existing fence line. Down here. To the west.
Okay. The site plan I'm looking at, it looks like the sidewalk is like right on the fence. That was why I was asking.
No, that wouldn't be the
Okay.
case.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
So I just want to also mention that, we've been, through quite a process of trying to understand, work with neighbors, understand their issues, be sensitive to all of those, be sensitive to the needs of the school, the safety of the children, which is, the primary reason for this project, and then balance some of the hardships that this site, represents. So have met with the Commissioner of Public Safety, reviewed his fire access. He's comfortable with our approach. And so we hope that you find that it satisfies the hardships and the criteria.
Any other questions for the petitioner from the commission?
I had one question for DLA, I guess. So you narrowed the central walkway from 12 feet to 10 feet. And then you
Correct. I think it was
also
16,
narrowed the
but-
drive, the pickup drop-off drive by 8 inches or something.
Narrowed this drive?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what one of your submissions said, that you narrowed it 8 inches. Is that not true?
Do we narrow this 8 inches?
Yes, that's what I think it said. Did anyone else read that?
I don't think so. We've got enough
It said-
space there for a fire lane, a pickup and drop-off lane, and then a passing lane. So I think that's remained consistent.
Okay, well, my question was just to be where, yeah, it was, well, if we just, that's not so important, I would just stick with it, what it says in the memorandum we got, is that the central walkway was narrowed from 12 feet, 5 inches to 10 feet. So I'm just
Correct.
wondering, where did that extra 2 feet go? Is that how you can put plants on the north,
I think that went probably to the
Into the
recreation field. Yeah.
Right, so how wide is the walkway on the south edge?
Oh,
On the south
here?
edge, that
5
way,
feet.
yeah. 5 feet, and then you still have room for plant material?
Correct.
Okay, And also, do you have total figures for the total square footage of the parking lot islands as configured? Just the islands, not the extra perimeter landscaping area, but only the islands?
I don't, and we could provide
Okay.
those. I mean, basically, we were required 17, and we're providing 12.
Of 144
Yeah,
square
of
foot
144,
roughly?
so.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all I had.
All right. Any other questions? All right. At this time, anyone else who's been sworn in and would like to speak on the application is welcome to come up to the podium.
I have a question.
Sure. Please come up to the podium and state your name.
Pull that up for you. There you go.
So I am Lonnie Satchi, 111 Woodside Road. This is my driveway along the edge here. And right now, there's grass at the end of it there. And we're able to see fine going in and out of our driveway. So I'm concerned on some of these drawings, it shows plantings alongside that chain link fence that's there. And I'm wondering what you're gonna put there, and we need to make sure that it doesn't obstruct our views of the sidewalk and the street.
I can show you.
Okay.
Yeah, basically along the garage is actually right here, and from here on is what goes to, is that Woodside? So what we've done here, basically, this is a sea of asphalt right now. This is the fence that goes along, so there's a skinny strip that goes along here. The front, there's a little triangle of grass in there, there's no plant material going in there except grass because of the site triangle.
Okay, because it does show plant material on some of the renderings.
I think they might have just showed it that it was green, but I mean, I'm not sure. We don't have any plants, any, yeah, right now. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I want to comment also that the letter that I received from the village. I want to also comment that the letter I received from the village about this meeting, and also stating that this material was going to be available on the website on Monday, March 20th, differs from what is being shown here tonight. And if you want me to be specific, I can show you what I mean. Because I'm very concerned about the location of the baseball diamond, right next to where we live. And so are some of my tenants that live there. They've spoken to me about it. So I told them I would be coming here tonight and pointing it out. Now, if I may, can you pull up that first drawing with the colors? So the material that was presented in January showed the baseball diamond being in this corner, away from where we live. The material that was on the website Monday, March 20th also showed that. Now tonight I walk in and lo and behold, it's moved to this spot over here, which is where it is, where it was before any of this work and where it is today. So what's being done here is we're taking that and moving it down closer to where we live. Now, the school, the kids at the school don't really cause any issues, any problems for us. But it's what happens late afternoon, in the evening, what goes on there. And I mean older kids coming and people, and none of which are attending school there, but they come there to practice ball or pitching or whatever, and they stay there. And sometimes, I'm not saying this happens every night, but some of them start throwing balls one after another against the chain link fence, rattling it and causing a lot of noise, which actually can get to be quite unbearable after a while. So I was almost ecstatic when I saw last time that it had been moved, even though it was closer to where we live, but it had been moved more towards this end of the playing field. So keeping it, now moving it back again tonight, over back to that corner where that problem is always, not always, but pretty much every week, someone comes and starts doing that. I'm really disappointed in that, and I object to it strongly. I don't want to have to be calling the police every other day because there's 18-year-old kids throwing hard balls against the chain link fence. And I mean, they bring them in a basket and just keep firing them one after another. So I hope that issue, and I don't expect you to even having thought of that, because you're just kind of addressing this whole issue about making it look pretty and keeping the kids away from traffic, which is all commendable. But don't create more problems to solve the ones that you were hired to do. And you're definitely creating a big problem for us that live there with that baseball diamond closer to our building. That's,
Can I ask a question of Mrs. Hutchins? There's a baseball backstop there right now. Are you saying
Right.
this one is going to be even closer to your property line?
yes.
Do you know how much closer? I mean, it
Well, I
looks
don't know
similar
if
to me,
we-
but,
Like, see where his jog occurs?
yes.
So right now, this field is pretty much even with that line. If you have an imaginary line across where that corner is. So now, I don't know how many feet you moved it towards Woodside.
I have the existing one there, I'll show it side by side.
So the field's a little longer, a little closer towards Woodside by 5, 10 feet or
It's
something.
closer.
So the backstop, therefore, even though it's the same general location, it's closer to the
It's
school and it's closer to your
considerably
property line.
closer.
Okay.
Set them side by side.
I got it.
Yeah, it looks like that's in the existing condition, it's right in this location, where that property line jogs over. And then in the proposed, looks like it might actually be a little bit, if on the diagonal, it might be a little bit further. If you have exhibits 2.1, EX 2.1, and EX 1.0, those are the two. So if you have them, you might see it better if you have the hard copy or a digital copy handy.
If we could have a page number in the packet, that would be super helpful.
I'm looking for that right now.
Okay. I will say to Mr. Sachi's comment that baseball diamond seems to be moving throughout the documents that we have. So it wasn't clear where that would be. In some of them, it is facing northeast. Yeah. So it's in that corner. So I just, is that the final location? That's to the best of your, okay.
Yeah, we've had, I'm working with fire departments, and there's been some things shifting around, as we know. But what we tried to do is keep it in the existing condition, existing location, but move it a little bit further away. You're correct that we did have it oriented the other way. I think there was some concern voiced that balls might be hit toward the residents. And for that reason, we thought that the existing condition and existing placement, we're bettering that a little bit, but essentially is the same. So, but to answer your question, this is the final location.
The final decision then is that the backstop will be further west or will not be
Further
further
east.
west? Basically,
Yeah.
it's going to be further east than it is now, so closer to Aiken side than it is now.
Correct.
So further away from Mr. Sachi's property.
Yes.
Okay, but still in the same general location, which he's probably not.
Yes. I
Pleased
mean,
about.
granted, it's still in the same general location.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I don't think that's correct.
You think what then?
Where, can we put this up? So here's where you're moving it. After having moved it here, now you're moving it back to where it's existing, only you're putting it closer to where I live and where my tenants live.
Well, I can't, honestly, I can't tell that. I mean, I don't have the thing in front of me. That's why I asked
Well-
DLA, and they're saying, I believe that it's a little
Jackie,
bit
come on
further.
over any time and I'll show you.
Maybe they could mark it out or stake it out or something.
This is an area.
Yeah, it's right there. I mean, right now, I live right over here, so it's right on the edge of the existing parking lot. So I think he's saying the field's gonna go a little farther, but. Maybe staking it.
I was going to say, I mean, we can certainly stake this out in the field, but the intent was to move it further away from the property.
Well, that would be great, but I want it further away from the building.
Sure.
Not so much, I mean, we're not out there in the corner
Right,
listening to it.
right. No, I
It's
understand.
when we're inside the apartments, you can hear them crashing walls against that chain link fence, sometimes constantly for over an hour. So however you're going to set that up, put it, I mean, I realize I live next door to a school. I don't expect, Buddha-like tranquility all the time, but I do expect things to not get worse than they are. And this makes it worse. Unless you can show me that you're not doing that. I'm open to hearing any kind of solutions here. Just don't make it worse than what it already is.
Believe it or not, too, the plantings in that little corner are gonna help buffer the sound.
No,
Not
they're-
completely, but
no,
they
they're
use,
not.
I mean, we use plants for that purpose a lot, I believe. We could change it to arborvitae, we could change it to a solid fence of evergreen there. In that triangle, that's now, it's just complete asphalt. Just what it's like.
Use a different fence? All I'm saying is don't bring it closer to the apartments. I don't care how it is. I mean, obviously, I don't sit out there and object to every little pin that drops, but, don't create the problem when you're trying to solve something else, because you're not thinking of everything about how it's affecting its neighbors. And this can get to be an issue.
Perhaps before the board meeting, we can have the petitioners provide staff with some information on exactly how, or where the new location will be relative to the current location of the backstop, so we can have that information.
Okay, so how are we leaving this evening? Are we going to try to stake this out, or what are you going to do about the backstop?
So the petitioners are going to look and compare the plans for the existing conditions to what they have proposed, and then they will let staff know what the difference is. So you'll be able to see how the change is going to be.
Okay, and then can staff inform me once they have that?
Certainly.
Okay. Sounds good.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Please step up to the podium. Thank you.
Gail McKernan, 146 Akenside. My concern really is about the fence and the loss of landscape along the Akenside Street. I mean, I know that we have the lilac bushes, and I measured those today. So we're talking about the fence being 5 feet from the sidewalk. The lilac bushes currently take up almost 25 feet, because I measured it on the way here. So we're losing all of that green, and the biggest fear is that it turns into what it looks like at Ames, which is a fence with mulch. And it looks terrible. So I love my lilac bushes. I've walked past them for 25 years, and I don't want to be looking at a fence in a parking lot. Thank you.
I would like to say too that, and I understand about the losing the lilacs, and again, we are replacing with large type plant material. But when this plant material does take root and do what it's supposed to, you're not even going to see, that fence is going to disappear. A 4-foot high fence, it'll be hard to see that except in the dead of winter.
But there's only 5 feet.
5 feet on one side, actually, we go up to about, 12, 14 feet here.
We have 25.
What's that?
We have 25 feet of landscape now. The width of the lilac bushes.
But that's what,
From the sidewalk to the other sidewalk.
did we say that? You want that?
Oh, what it is, yeah, the existing space, yeah, so we're trying, well, sorry, I'm not going to interrupt.
You're trying to gain more for the
Playground,
playground
yes.
and less for the residents.
Correct.
The sidewalk is moving towards the school, so you'll have more landscaping on the Akenside Road side of that sidewalk, because that sidewalk,
You're moving the public sidewalk?
yes.
How far from the street?
Ma'am,
are you moving
could we have you come up and speak at the podium, please, so that we capture your audio? You can't hear anything unless you're speaking to your microphone. Thank you.
So the Akenside sidewalk is moving?
I think it's going to run right along the property line now, right? Whereas now it does not run right along the property line. And the property line curves a little bit? Okay.
How far off the curb will the sidewalk begin?
At the narrowest, it'll be 15 feet at the far north. And then at the midpoint, 20 feet from the curb to the sidewalk. And then at the far south, 15 feet again.
How far is it now?
10. 11.
Right.
How could that be if you're moving it closer to the street?
No, it's moving away from the street, up to the school property line.
But so you're increasing the width of the parkway and shortening the depth of the planting, the landscape buffer. Was there a reason, was there a reason for that?
We could.
No, I'm just asking, because to increase the width of the parkway and shorten the landscape buffer doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But
I would like to just make the comment that I wasn't actually aware that the existing sidewalk was moving.
I did not see that in
any of the Yeah. materials. So I just,
You had to look very closely at the diagrams. I raised this a couple weeks ago because I noticed that some of the diagrams showed that. But I would just comment that the parkway is public property, and I think many of us could seek to have plantings put in the public parkway, trees in the public parkway to help do some shielding. And I don't know if that would be an obligation of the property owner, that they should be planting trees in the parkway, or if it would be something that our village forester would do. But I think
Well,
that could be a partial
There
solution.
are trees in the parkway now,
Along the,
along the school parking lot
well,
on
maybe we could do
Akenside.
something additional. You're right, I
Well,
can't remember exactly, I don't live right
I'm
there.
concerned the other
but-
way. I mean, looking at the school, looking at the parking lot, a buffer there. Because right now, you can walk past, you don't know there's a building, you don't know there's a playground. You hear the children.
Right, well, yeah.
I mean,
We're more than happy to maintain the existing location of the sidewalk. We were under the understanding that we wanted to increase the parkway, but we're more than willing to maintain the existing location.
I don't know if it's the appropriate time, but maybe we could ask also, in addition to the backstop issue, if there was a little more detailing in front of the village board about exactly what plantings will be being placed, bushes, perennials, whatever, in the perimeter area of the school property by the parking lot and by the lot.
I mean, they could be bigger. I mean, what is it to be?
We got various sizes in here, but we were going by village code for the trees. We're at 2.5-inch caliper. The red buds were 9 feet. Arborvitae's 5 feet.
Well, along Akenside, I think you said 6 to 8 feet, right?
Well, they're going to grow to 6 to 8 feet. They'd be coming in at like 4 feet to start. But again, these are they're not considered slow-growing plants by any means. But again, we have to start somewhere, and that with this layout, that's what we were working with, to fill them. Sure.
Is it okay if I ask questions?
If you can step to the podium and state your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Gulick. I'm at 95 Michelle Road, almost across the street. And I think I had one clarification question and then more of a question on the process. So is the fence, are the plantings on the inside of the fence or on the outside of the fence?
On the outside.
The fence-
It's separating the sidewalk from there's a.
Plantings are on the outside of the fence.
Because here they look like ice. Is someone point out the fence
Oh, here.
and
Yeah,
the
let me slide through there real
plantings?
quick.
It wasn't clear because
Yeah.
it looked like the fence was on the outside.
Yeah, this is the fence right here. This line here.
Okay, I see. All right.
So this is all open to the sidewalk.
Yep, okay.
So yeah, that's why I was mentioning that the fence is going to disappear once this plant material kicks in.
Got it, all right. And then kind of my question for the board has to do really with, we talked about setting precedents, and this is now a fence, which there doesn't seem to be like a lot of fences in Riverside, and especially it's a fence along a prominent part of Akenside. And, let's face it, that's a very prominent street, and the streetscape, particularly around the school, is very important because the existing plantings there really do mask the parking lot. You really don't quite know that there's a parking lot there. So I guess my point is that the school is asking for some substantial variations, from the regulations. And it seems like you should consider what I just talked about with regard to the view towards that in granting any approval. If there should be an approval, particularly with the setting precedents for fences, mainly with other commercial properties as well. And then I don't know what the point is.
Would anyone
So I
else
think
like to
the only
speak?
thing I'd like to add is that, I mean, the fencing, yes, a variation. It's primarily focused on safety, expanding recreation for the school. And, you know, the robust landscape design is meant to specifically to, you know, recreate greenery where it's going away, mask the fence, mask the parking lot, create that buffer and that screening that Riverside is used to. So,
And could you do that without a fence? Create safety and just do that with landscape as opposed to a fence?
I mean, in our opinion, no. I mean, a bush is not going to keep a ball from going into the street. It's not going to keep a child from chasing that ball into the street or into the parking lot. It's a standard good practice design that we employ. And, you know, we work with villages to mitigate that and, you know, be sympathetic to not having those in the street yard, or if they are, to create some landscape screening around them. So.
I guess this goes again to a question with regard to your approval or not. And again, it seems like there is a trying to come up with some sort of an idea that works for both parties. But again, we're looking at doing, you know, variances that affect homeowners along Michoud and Akenside. And is there a way to not do the encroachment onto this area here and just have the fence more into the recreation area? You know, we've spoken a lot about the requirements, and we're looking for variations to the code, but I don't know if there's anything in the code about the size of the recreation area. So one of the solutions I would think would be just to simply make a slightly smaller recreation area.
Sir, if you can just step
Go
to the
ahead.
podium and
Hi, Tom Van Durham from 85 Akenside, right directly behind the school next to Bob here. Was there any consideration for the ball field to be natural grass or field turf, or?
Which, natural grass or field?
Yeah, well, you have it in here as a field turf, correct? Synthetic?
We've shown two options in terms of pervious and impervious. So that decision hasn't been made yet, but yes,
Okay.
we have considered both, and we're weighing those options.
Okay, and one more question. On all these plants that you're putting in, what type of maintenance is in the plan to maintain them, to water them, or?
That will be part of the package, as far as, how much is gonna be done in-house and what, and having a maintenance company come in and do whatever is needed besides.
I can speak to that as well. I mean, part of the project is a 2-year warranty that covers all the landscaping, covers all the construction in general. The district does have a landscape company, outside company, that comes and maintains all the plantings and the watering, so that is part of the plan.
Okay, with temperatures rising out there and everything, and it's a concern, some things that were made to last in Riverside just don't survive anymore. So I think that has to be considered in terms of really just, if we're gonna plant all these materials, they're only gonna be good as far as you know, they'll only go so far as you maintain them, so. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Gulick at 95 Michaud with Bob. As the other lady had spoken about, we're just very concerned about the size of the landscape area along Akenside, all along and including in front of the parking lot. No one likes to look at cars sitting across from your, outside your front. And certainly this whole moving of the sidewalk and expanding the park strip, which may give you some more trees, but trees they offer color and they're beautiful, but they're higher up. They don't offer a screen. And as she had said, we were also out there measuring, and it was like 20-some, 25 feet closer to probably right around here, but where it is wider. But going down to like 5 feet, that doesn't give you much room for screening. And I'm just concerned that you've got these big mature bushes there right now that really do a good job. They help with the sound and all of that. And I'm just more concerned that there won't be as substantial bushes and larger type of plantings there. I love flowers, I love everything, but ground cover isn't going to do a lot as far as covering up the fact that it's a big parking lot and field. So,
Just to your point though, again, viburnum lentiana, 8 foot plus
8
at
foot.
maturity.
Okay.
Miskin lilac easily 6 foot. The Charles Jolie is 12 foot, so there
But
probably needs some trimming.
right now, you've got, we looked at it, there are like 2 or 3 rows of big mature lilacs versus maybe just, 1 row, and if they don't do well, it's a concern that you're really, we're losing space, landscaping space. Maybe moving the sidewalk over back to where it is now could give us some more area, but that's what we're really concerned about.
I just have a question for the board, and that is, when these zoning variances are granted, are they granted on condition that the school actually executes this plan? Or can the school basically get these variances and then go, this was an aspiration, but you know what, we just aren't going to do it. Let's get everything built. So that's my question for you.
The approvals would be tied to these specific plans.
Tied to, okay, thank you.
That being said, so the site plan certainly will, but that being said, if you get a variation for a fence, that doesn't stop you from saying, well, we decided not to build a fence, for instance, right? They can't do more than they're given, but they could do, if they didn't ultimately decided they didn't need a fence for whatever reason, I think is the best example. They wouldn't be forced to build it by getting this variation.
I got a question. Mike Richards, 110 Mishaw. One thing I was wondering is can you put this up maybe? If you're eliminating this here with all the parking that's there today, how do you still end up with the same number of spaces over here? If you eliminate the parking where the playground is?
Here?
Yeah. No, where the orange is.
Oh, yes, correct.
How do you still end up with 10 more spaces in the main section?
Because it's organized a whole lot better.
That's right. But you still have the same square footage.
Yeah, what's parking now obviously is dedicated to play space and permeable pavers, but yeah, we're able to, lay it
So
out.
it's just relined and
Yeah.
but you don't have more room to park necessarily.
No, but you get more efficient
Yeah.
spaces.
Okay. I think that's 30 spaces you'd be eliminating there, right here. So it's tough to make up in here. And then it'll get pushed to the street.
Well, we're trying to, provide for as much buffer as we can, as, village ordinance requires.
Hey, Brian, will you call out why we're moving the playground back there?
Why we're moving this
Yeah,
way?
why is that playground there?
Oh, versus being in the front?
Yeah, we haven't, so that was a prior conversation, so maybe let's back up, like, why are we actually putting it there? Because what I'm hearing is, can people still park there, but we need the playground there because we can't have it where it currently is.
Oh, yeah. The big goal of this is creating more play space. The school needs it. And so right now, there's a small playground right here. We looked at expanding that playground. There are 3 oak trees, or maybe 2 oaks, and Paul would know better than I. They're each about 180 years old. We couldn't expand that playground that would be reasonable for the size elementary school and have those trees survive. So we met with the village arborist, talked quite a bit to Public Works as well, and so it made the most sense to locate that playground in the back. So it does impact that parking. I can assure you that, these are real dimensions and real site plans, and that we're able to get that 87 spaces there by making it more efficient,
Right, 10 more than are currently there.
which is 10 more than is currently there, correct.
I don't see how.
They don't park the whole parking lot. They leave half of the middle parking lot for play space. It's a recess area.
Yeah, I think that is the difference, it is.
Parking lot, and an asphalt place where kids play on almost.
Yeah, but when you have an event at night, they.
Park all over the place.
They park all over,
Right.
you won't have that anymore.
We will have a better, more efficient parking spot.
And that's what we're looking to,
30 less spaces though.
But we have 10 more in total.
That's the mouse you're playing, the shell game. It's less square footage for parking. I don't know, I'm just trying to clarify that.
sure.
I like overall the theme, the scheme. But I do agree with doing something along the Aiken side, like the women mentioned, maybe moving the sidewalk closer to the curb and putting more of a green space barrier there.
So we just looked at that. We could leave the existing sidewalk in place, if that's more amenable. It would increase the green space in between the sidewalk and the property line by about 10 feet, so a total of 15. That's something that we'd be open to doing.
Do you know why they moved it? I'm just kind of curious. Is there a reason why? Because if it's there, you think, just leave it there. But for some reason,
Well, the reality is it's not in good shape at certain places, and it could be affected by construction. So whether it gets replaced or not, or the location is something we could talk about, but construction would dictate whether or not it would need to be replaced from the existing. Does that make sense?
So is leaving the existing bushes are there now, is it a matter of cost or construction? Or is it somehow a matter of something essential for this plan? Because it sounds like what you're saying is that it's a matter of construction costs. So I don't see why they couldn't go in through, leave the existing plantings there, going through the parking lot. You have this huge, entryway to the parking lot.
Yeah, no, it's not a matter of construction costs at all. It's a matter of, with regard to the lilacs, one, that they are older, and they're probably not going to.
They look good.
Some of them.
See it every day.
No, I know. I don't live there. I'm not arguing that point with you, but some of them are older, and they probably wouldn't survive construction of the recreation space. So, so we will need to excavate, whether we do a natural grass field or a synthetic turf field, we will be providing under drainage below that field. So we'll need to excavate down below that. So in order to do that, it's going to impact those lilac trees. So.
Almost under. Oh, well, there's the answer. That's the answer right there.
Yeah, either of these fields would, Jason talked about it a little bit, would require, and we would provide drainage system underneath.
So, yeah, and that rules anything, rules out the lilacs.
Well, I think it does the existing lilacs, but we could provide new lilacs and screenings.
Once the
as Paul
tank's
talked
put in,
about.
it's up above that, then.
That would be below grade, yeah.
Above grade.
All right, does anyone else wish to speak on this?
I have no other.
Okay.
So in January, I asked that there be given some consideration to the existing fence along my driveway. It's been mangled up a few times and straightened out. Parts of it have been replaced. Other parts are rusty. The bottom of it has, the bottom of the chain links are not bent over, and they stick out sometimes. So since there's so much fencing going on here, I asked that perhaps that could be replaced to blend with the rest of the new fencing with the black chain link. Was that given any consideration in the last 2 months?
Yeah, we looked at all the fencing. So, yeah, I mean, we looked at all the fencing, and we are, that fence we are proposing to leave in place because it is so close to the property line, or well, it's right on the property line, and both your driveway run right up to it. So I think that at this time we would not include that in the project.
Why not?
I think that the construction would go beyond the fencing. We'd be talking about restoration of driveways and other areas, so.
I don't think so, because the posts are set in concrete right on sort of a high curb separating my driveway from the schools.
Yeah, I mean, we can take a look at it. It's right on the property line. We certainly can consider it.
Okay. And then the next time we come here, I'm sure the answer will be that you're going to leave it the way it is.
One more question. This area here with the plantings and things like that, after hours, I mean, I think the school district put out some signs, trying to curtail some of the activity at night of the cars that come in and out of the parking lot, the disturbance that it causes late at night for sometimes hours on end, if it's snowing out and all that kind of fun stuff that people like to have in the parking lot when there's snow on the ground. Will this design curtail any of that activity at night to kind of maybe calm down on the nuisance level? The signs that have been put up there with the chains to the entrance on the parking lot on Aiken side seem to be completely disregarded on a regular basis, with cars coming in and out at all times of night and making noise and all that kind of fun stuff. But will this kind of maybe curtail some of that or reduce that activity?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. We talked to Commissioner Buckley quite a bit about how to curtail some of that. There will be some parking lot lighting, all of which is within village ordinance, so zero light at the lot. In those, it would be, there'd be parking lot lighting within the parking lot, but there'd be no light at the property line. So it's consideration to make sure that anything that's happening on the site doesn't impact the neighbors.
So what kind of lighting?
Parking lot lighting?
What is that? Tall poles?
I think we would have 10-foot poles.
Where are they located?
We don't have well, I mean, essentially at the islands. I think we've got one here, 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 and here.
And there's no lighting now.
Correct.
They just flush down, right?
Correct. Yeah, they're LEDs. And there's a dark sky ordinance that the village ordinances are based upon, so we would adhere to that. So you wouldn't have any light bleed outside the property. But my point was, where I was going with that was, within these lights, we would have security cameras. So those are a deterrent. You make them visible. Can't deter everything, but we've again talked to Commissioner Buckley about what we can do and how we can work with him to deter that. Certainly signage, certainly cameras. Blue lights on cameras helps, even though there's not a recording going on. So all those strategies are things that we've talked about.
The signs that were put up a year or two ago, they pay no regard to it.
Yeah.
You still have an open area in the middle, there's an island buffer in the middle, would help if they go in and they do donuts. So I think you'll still have the donut.
It's Donut City in there. If there's a flake of snow on the ground.
Right in the middle. Also discourage them a little bit. Yeah, they're gonna take their tires out if they slide it. Yeah, let's make sure. Less inclined, you know.
You can't escape on the windside. That'll make a big difference.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Do we have any further comments?
So I am still rather concerned about the lighting because I know, we just moved in a couple of years ago, but when we first moved in, it's existing lighting and it's on the school. And they changed it maybe to some nice bright LED. I don't know if you notice it, Tom. It is it's on the school, which is, way set back. It's probably like back here and back here. And there are soft yellow ones, those don't bother me, but these new, nice, bright, probably super energy efficient, shine like into our living room. Like, I was joking with Bob, I'm like, I thought this is supposed to be, you mentioned something about dark skies or something. Not if you live across from the school. It's annoying. I guess I've never said anything, but, so I am concerned about any lighting that's gonna be any closer and how bright it's going to be, because those lights are you would agree, right, Tom?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed it as well, the lights?
Okay, I think their lighting is compliant with village codes, right, to what we know?
The lighting will, yeah,
Yep. So they don't need a variation for the lighting.
no.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, so my name is Wesley Muirhead. I live at 319 Bartram, so I'm up on the north side of Delaplane. I got 2 fourth graders at Ames School, been in town for 7 years, and I'm an active board member of the school board as well. So I've been very involved with these designs, hence my piping up from time to time. I'm here just to voice the full support from myself. I'm not here on behalf of my board or an official statement from the Board of Education. I'm just here on my own with my own public comments, but wanted to point out that I am a board member. So the 3 variations that we're requesting today is the wrought iron fence coming along the east and south ends around this field, the trash enclosure here, and then the variation for the parking, because we do need 114 spots. We're only producing 87. We've had extensive discussion on this for well over a year, and with these specific site, really trying to get into the details of these site plans for probably over 6 months, I think, from what we were talking about the last board. So we've heard all of this feedback in different formats before, and we have had extensive dialogue, both open and behind the scenes. Joel and I have met a couple different times for several hours, talking through this in detail, as well as other board members. So I hope that most of the questions that were asked today, you had valid answers to, because we've put a lot of thought into how the field is formatted. Really, the main point for the school is giving the children the best learning environment that we can. Right now, it's a disaster, and in the 7 years that I've lived here, I've heard nothing but complaints about this, and people going back 15, 20 years asking for some sort of site improvement on it. So I'm not saying that's the reason that you should approve it, but this is by far the most challenging plan that we've done of all the schools so far. Ames would be the next biggest one that we did. As far as I'm aware, we have not had any lighting complaints. Currently, we do not have lighting. I think that's part of the reason that we have issues with here. On the other side, we've had people say we want bright lighting, we want no lighting, and we have had, we'll call it juvenile activity complaints at Ames, and we've had them in other places, and we are working very closely with Chief Buckley and the police department to patrol that. We are not a security organization, so we do need to rely on that for after-school type things. So that has all been extensive considerations taken in for those items. But for the purposes of tonight, the one variation with the fence, I won't say all the board members, but many of the board members feel pretty strongly about that fence for the safety reasons that Ryan brought up here. Right now, the argument could be you don't have a fence now, why do you need one later? One is because we don't believe that these lilacs will survive the massive amount of excavation that we need to do here. They're gonna die off, we need to replant it with something else. Completely appreciate the fence lines. I am not aware of any complaints of the open fence from the Ames neighbors. I'm not sure we really had a lot of concern about that when the project went up either. So it would look similar to that, but we are, this is the first time I've seen the vegetation plans actually, because we haven't gotten into that level of detail of what exactly we're gonna put up there, but we've had a lot of discussion of making sure that we can replicate to the best of our abilities covering that fence. I walk by here nearly every day with my dogs, and I've taken extensive observation on it, and I would disagree that currently it screens it, because right now it's just a bunch of tall sticks. In the summers, it looks very nice and it covers it a little bit more, but in the winter, it doesn't really do a very good job whatsoever. And I know from our staff, they have asked for more parking. Listening to the January meeting from you all and the feedback that you've had, we've taken a lot of that feedback into consideration, moved the islands around. We don't want to expand parking anymore. I don't think you as a board want to do that either. I think there was actually favor of reducing parking further to create more green space. So we think this is sufficient for what we need, but right now that field cannot be used at all. I mean, it's basically a bowl, and if it rains, it's mud. There's very little physical education on that field. It's really not used to any potential whatsoever. So our biggest concern is recreating that space so that the PE department and the children, and we know that these are public spaces and that kids, teenagers from around town are going to play on them. So we're trying to do the mitigation as best that we can. Like I said, at Ames and the other schools, we'll have to continue that here. But really just kind of want to bring it back center with all of the valid concerns that are here that we will continue to take back and do our best to accommodate those. But really that fencing is a safety concern, because now with a more usable field, we're going to have kids closer to that street. And there's a real concern from the staff at Ames that a fence needs to be there. So as a board member, hearing from the people that work for my organization saying we need to have a fence there for safety reasons, we are very much advocating for that variance. On the other hand, they're advocating for more parking. We're not necessarily helping boost that for them, but we did try to create more space, and that's where the engineering here came from. And then I don't have much to talk about the trash receptacle there. It's just, we need to put it somewhere, so we're trying to make it look as nice as possible. So that's all I really have. Just, we have really strong commitment from the board on this plan. In general, we still have some decisions to make on the grass or the turf. I'll say publicly, I said it publicly at the last meeting, I'm leaning towards more of the natural grass. I think that is a viable solution. The more we've asked you a lot of questions about that, and short of guaranteeing that we can actually use this and drain it properly, we've gone and looked out at Schaumburg and Joel, where'd you go the other? River Forest and a couple other places that have done different engineering projects. And we think we can make a natural grass work. We have not made that decision yet. We still need more time for what that would look like, what the cost, what the timing, how does that impact with the rest of the project, all that stuff. But I personally would like to see a natural grass field there. And with that and being more play area there, just protecting from the parking lot and from the street, we feel pretty strongly that fence is needed. So those are my comments in support of this, and hopefully the four of you, seeing as how we have 3 other people missing, will agree with that, and we can move it on to the board. Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, would anyone else like to speak? All right. If everyone is finished, could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Before we make that motion, I just want to make sure from the school district perspective, you guys are, once the public hearing is closed, there'll be votes and moving on. I want to make sure that, having heard all the comments and everything, you're comfortable moving forward tonight?
Maybe I should make one more comment. I wasn't officially sworn in. So
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge?
Yes. So I'm Martha Ryan, I'm the superintendent for Riverside District 96, and I do appreciate, I think Wesley said it perfectly well, so I don't really need to say much more, other than one thing that I want to make clear is that the recreational field area is now going to be intended for children from Central Elementary School as well as our Hauser Junior High. So there are going to be younger children playing in that field area. So I know some people may stop and say, that's been a field for middle school kids for years without a fence. We're really looking at a very different use, and we're excited about that opportunity because those, probably a lot of you had children that went to Central perhaps. They have played on blacktop forever and forever, so we're excited for that change. Thanks.
Is the playground out front being eliminated, or you do something with that? In the front of houses?
So that's what we consider like a pre-K to grade 2 playground. It's a young child's playground. It's a small footprint and it's got sort of little kid equipment on it. And we're looking to maybe make some improvements there just because that equipment is old. But as DLA pointed out, we're not able to make any expansion there with because of the trees that are in the area.
Well, you will keep it updated.
Yeah, that's our plan. Yeah.
All right. Now, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. I move to close the public hearing.
And I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And now we move on to discussion, motion, and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Village Board regarding the request for variations set forth in item 6C1 above. Would anyone like to begin the discussion?
Are we working off of the memorandum, March 22nd memorandum? So we'll go in that order for each of the variations, or?
Yes, that would make sense.
So the first one is the fences?
Yes.
Do I have the right memo? Okay. Well, I would like to note that in 1B, it's in fact, it sounds like 1 4-foot-tall black wrought iron style fence that should be referred there, not 2.
Yes,
So-
that's correct. I believe at the time that the legal ad was drawn and the public notice was given, there was some consideration given to replacing the fence on the, now my directions are screwed up.
On the parking lot side, right?
Yes, I believe that's it, yes, but there is
Okay.
one.
I would like to suggest that in response to some of the concerns that we've heard tonight, that the fence at least be moved an additional 5 feet off of the property line to provide, let's say, a minimum distance of 5 feet off of the property line to provide a sufficient area for landscaping.
Any thoughts on that proposal?
It seems that there's sufficient space to move. There's kind of a square that has been drawn. That is what they're dimensioning the fence off of. So they provided 4.7 feet on one of these diagrams from that square. That is, I believe, the soccer fields. That rectangle could easily be moved closer to the school. It still would not encroach on the pitcher's mound of the baseball diamond. So it seems that that would be a manageable change.
Right, any other thoughts on the fence along Akenside? All right. How about
Your question was, what are the thoughts on your fence, about the fence along Akenside? I'm in favor of it. I think that the certain experts have indicated that it's a safety issue. I happen to agree with that. I'm not, I have to think about whether or not moving the fence 5 additional feet off of the property line is something that would impede the use of the recreational field or not. But I definitely am in favor of having a fence there.
Okay, I agree with, we should have a fence there. I am resistant somewhat to that concept of moving it for a couple of reasons. If we decide to allow the fence, I think the petitioner has a right to put it on their property line because it will enhance the amount of play space that's going to be available. I mean, 5 feet doesn't sound like much, but if you expand it by however many, 180 feet, that's a sizable piece of land that wouldn't be available for recreation for all those students. And it has been a challenge, it's an unfortunate play space for the students for decades and decades and decades. So now we're putting a fence there. I think just for some, to add to, I think there's a greater value for the students to have that greenery as an area that they can use to recreate in than for landscaping, which wouldn't benefit the students.
I think it may be hard for any of us to visualize what a mature landscaping would look like from pictures or from diagrams. But I think that there's hope that the experts can do what they intend to do. I think that there is going to be some buffer there. I don't want to take away some play space from the children. Not when there are options with landscaping to provide the same sort of buffer that the neighborhood wanted.
All right. The next item is the fence that is perpendicular to Akenside along the south side of the recreational fields.
I think that's reasonable at a 4-foot height and again for safety. They did eliminate the fence that would have bordered the parking lot, which I think was something that I was concerned about last time. That has been eliminated. So I think having the fence is, since it's right next to a recreational field, will there be soccer and baseball? It's eminently reasonable to have a fence paralleling the field.
I totally agree with really the need for the fencing along Akenside as well as, the fence that is in an east-west direction. I would like to make sure that we at least clarify where the 4-foot fence along Akenside Road is going to be, only from the standpoint of one of the diagrams that I'm looking at that seems to be the most accurate, which is page 93 of our packet, shows the fence along the property line for the entire frontage of Akenside. Whereas there is another, I think the one that came with the variance actually shows the fence in a straight line with a minimum.
That's not, that thick line? The thick line you're looking at or not?
Well, no, the fence, which is with the little X's, which is exactly almost on top of. So this goes to a point that I wanted to make earlier, is I feel like we do not have a single site plan that accurately shows what you're proposing. And that's something I would like to see. Possibly, maybe not in order to approve the variances, but certainly in order to approve the site plan.
I think that's a good point.
Right, I agree. So when we get to the site plan, which is after this, you know, the hour's getting late, and I think your points are well taken in terms of the diagrams. So, you know, you can take that continuance up when you get to that.
Okay.
All right. Next, the next variation is for the 20-foot tall backstop fence.
I think that's fine with, I mean, it's a reasonable variation request.
Can we put a condition on it that it not be closer to the residential properties than the existing? I mean, I think the indication was that it is not, that they are not proposing for it to be closer. Can we just make that a requirement of the variation?
We could.
I think we need more, didn't we request more information with regard to where it is in relation to the neighbor's property? I'm in favor of the 14-foot fence, but
Agreed.
We need to know that location. Or where
Right, so there was discussion of clarifying the location relative to the apartment building prior to the board consideration, right?
Yes.
So the board would have that information before them. You're welcome to make it a condition as
Okay.
well, as part of your recommendation, so long as everybody agrees.
Is agreeing, right. Okay.
All right. Any thoughts with regard to the refuse enclosure?
For me, it's totally fine.
Yes.
It's obviously necessary, so it's an appropriate place.
I think it's a good idea that it's enclosed.
And it will be a vast improvement from
Yes.
current conditions. So,
All right, and then the sidewalk going from 5 feet wide to 10 feet wide.
I think that's reasonable. I commented last time that I thought 12 feet was too wide, or 16 feet, or whatever it was, so I think this is an improvement, but still provides sufficient space for pedestrians and bicycles going in and out of the site, since it will be the main access point from Aiken side.
And why is there a variance? Why is that a variance?
The maximum width is, maximum allowable width is 5 feet for a sidewalk.
On
So,
property.
Because they want to go 10 feet.
Of any, on any property?
Well, in the street yard.
Okay.
It's in the street yard.
Okay.
The next variation to reduce the number of parking spaces from 114 to 87. Issues with that?
I think it's an improvement over existing, and it's a good balance between providing landscaping and, you know, providing parking.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would always prefer less parking, but I understand the desire for more parking. And so I think it's a reasonable balance, and I don't think there's any point in requesting one more parking lot island or anything else. I think this is reasonable from the petitioner's standpoint and from the village's standpoint.
And the other side of that is the landscape median variations to provide fewer of those, which again, it's that balancing act of parking versus landscaping.
I think it's a good balance.
I agree.
All right, is anyone prepared to make a motion?
I do have a question, and just for clarification, I want to make sure I heard this right. These plans, the sidewalk is being moved, it's being moved closer to the school? Is that, and do we know?
That's one thing that I cannot figure out, because the actual drawing that has been submitted to us for the variance of the fence does not appear to show the sidewalk being moved.
I thought I heard that if the sidewalk isn't moved, there'll actually be more green space on the other side of the fence that they're proposing to put more landscaping.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The variance that the site plan for the fence variance shows the sidewalk in its existing location, and therefore provides room behind the sidewalk before the fence for landscaping.
So that's the
On
issue we
public-
have, is
on
that we
public
have
way.
multiple plans showing
Correct.
multiple
That is correct.
locations for things. So that's something that, when we get to the site plan, we can ask for further clarification, but at this point, for the variations, we're kind of stuck with what we've got.
I would rather, if in fact the sidewalk could be kept in its same place and give more space, green space, between the fence where it is proposed to be and the sidewalk, I'm in favor of keeping the fence where it's at and moving the sidewalk, or not moving the sidewalk, rather than moving the fence. Does that make sense?
So perhaps you'd like to make a motion in favor of the variations with the condition that that the sidewalk remain in its current location?
If in fact keeping the sidewalk in its current location will do that, then yes, that's my motion.
And does the school district have any particular issue with considering leaving the sidewalk?
No.
Where it is? Okay.
I'll say no.
Okay.
And it provides 10 more feet landscaping between the sidewalk and the school.
I think it's 5, but that's okay.
All right, we have that as a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All
So
right.
it's a motion to approve the variations with the sidewalk, on the condition the sidewalk be kept, relative to the fence, the sidewalk be kept in its present location?
Yes.
May I-
And did we also want to add the backstop? Location cannot be any closer to current to the residential property lines.
Linda, are you all right with that amendment?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
That the baseball backstop cannot be any closer to the residential property lines on the north side than it currently is.
I'm okay with that.
The 20-foot high fence for the backstop.
All right.
I'll add that to my motion
Okay.
as the recommendation to the board.
Can I add one more requirement? Only that the fence and sidewalk location be as indicated on page 89 of our packet, because that is what reflects what you're.
That shows the current
It
location of
does.
the sidewalk.
Yeah, it shows the current location of the sidewalk.
Okay, not being moved, okay.
Right,
Okay.
the fence.
Yes, I agree.
And that has the largest green space between the fence and the sidewalk. Okay.
I'm not sure I understood that one.
So that's for our first condition, that the sidewalk remain in the same location as shown on page 89 of our packet.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then a second condition, that the backstop not be closer north than it currently is located.
And the third requirement.
I think you're missing something on the backstop. Not only, it isn't so much a question of how far it is from the property line between my property and the school. It's a question of moving it closer to the building. So the way you're wording it, it could theoretically be sliding down that property line closer to the building. What we want to do is keep, at the minimum, the existing distance between the property, between the building, not the property, between the building and the existing backstop. Clear?
It's clear. I think that what we're saying is, that is the intent.
So can we, I know we're not in open, but since we're taking open, can we clarify?
Okay, so
Yeah, if the commission wants clarification, they're allowed to ask for it.
Yes, please do.
Can you,
I'm not sure that where the debate is, building versus property line, but it is moving further to the southeast from its existing location by about 10 feet.
Do you say school side or?
So,
yeah, so,
the existing location's about here, it's moving to about here by 10 feet.
Okay.
Okay, thank
So-
you. So it is moving further
So it
away
is
from the house.
moving further away. We could, we could say further south and east.
Well, I think,
Which is
I
what
think
you
the
just said.
motion would be dependent upon the representation just made by DLA. Can we do that?
Can the
Attorney Morris?
diamond be orientated so that it's on the other side, other corner? I mean,
we
or
can,
some
but
of
we
the,
had comments from the other neighbor of balls going into their garden, so we're trying to make as many accommodations as we can.
All right. Are we set with our motion?
So can we summarize it?
I think it's clear to me, but I don't know if it is to everyone.
All right. So we need a motion that the sidewalk stay in the same, motion of recommending approval with the condition that the sidewalk remain in the same location as shown on page 89 of our packet, that the backstop not be closer to the residential properties than it currently is. Was there a third piece?
I think that the backstop not be any further west
North
or
or
north than its current location. I
Okay.
believe that's correct. Which DLA has represented is not what is going to happen.
All right. Was there any other pieces of that?
That the fence be located as indicated on sheet 89.
Yes, the fence also be located as shown on page 89.
Except for the backstop, because it's not right. I think we all, the fence along Aiken side.
Fence along Aiken side. All right, I think we have it.
So I think, was that my motion?
no, I think it was
That
my
was your
motion.
motion? I'll second it. I will second the motion.
Are you good with the motion as stated?
I'm good with the motion as stated.
And who
I
seconded
will
it?
second the motion.
Okay.
All right.
And then we should go through the standards briefly.
Yes.
I suggest you don't do them individually, just do them as a group unless anybody has a reason.
Yes, as we'll take the petition as a whole, all of the variations, because of particular physical or other unusual condition of the specific property involved, a particular hardship or practical difficulty to the owner will result as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out.
Yes, I
Yes.
think if the strict
Yes.
letter were carried out, they would not be able to function.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
That the purpose of the variation is not primarily based upon a desire to increase financial gain.
Yes.
It's not the
Yes.
case. That the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person presently having an interest in the property.
Correct?
That the conditions upon which the petition for the variation is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same zoning classification.
Correct?
Yes.
As far as the unique nature of it being a school?
That the granting of the variation will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located.
Yes.
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 The granting of the variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And the proposed variation will not impair an adequate supply of light or air to adjacent property. Say yes.
yes.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Ann, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Pelletier,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Braun,
Yes.
Commissioner Hennigan.
Yes. Motion passes. So then this will go to the village board for final decision on their at their April 6th meeting. Let's see. Is it okay to move on to old business since we still have a new business item pending?
Sure.
All right. So this item is PZ 23-0001, site plan review for the Central Hauser parking lot and site improvements, which is page 110 in the packet. So as opposed to the variations, this is looking at the site plan as a whole. And could you take it over? Sure.
Well, before we do this, so, school district, you heard, some concerns from the commission about the plans and the different plans showing up on different pages and, everything. So, and given that we're starting this at 10:03, I think it might be advisable for everyone to continue this to the next meeting. This doesn't go on to the board, so this is the final reviewing body. So it's not like it's going to extend the process by more than that. Are you guys amenable?
The site plan part of it. So
Right, the site plan, right. Variations are all moving on.
No, and I think, I was just telling Dr. Ryan Toy here, like, I agree with you on the site plans. Even when I was kind of going through today, I noticed different variations, so I think that's absolutely fair. We'll
Okay.
clean it up.
All right, so this will be continued to the April 26th meeting for further discussion?
Yep.
Do we need to do a motion, or is that?
Yeah, let's do motions.
I move that we continue this discussion to the April meeting.
Second?
I second.
And could you call the roll?
Commissioner Pelletier? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I?
I may not be here.
That's right, I was wondering about that. I was
Right.
thinking about the numbers. Are we going to have a meeting next month? Was that a concern? At the beginning of the meeting? I'll be here.
I'm planning on
Say
being
that'll
here.
depend on if we have John.
You will not be here?
I will be here.
Oh, you'll be here. So that's 3 and then John. So we need to have him. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a chance of that.
And you do need 4 votes for a site plan to be approved.
So this will be depending on whether or not we have 4 commissioners present.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I don't care if we want to get this done. It's fine with me.
Yeah, I think we need an accurate site plan, so
Yeah.
we've got to do it. And could you call the roll, please?
Yes, just Johnny is.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Aye, sorry.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Braun?
Aye.
Commissioner Hennigan?
Aye. All right. Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wednesday. It's always the fourth.
The 26th.
No, it's, for us, it's April 26th. We meet once a month. The other meeting they were referring was the board meeting.
Yeah, the variations. She had a question.
That'd be April 26th.
The fourth Wednesday. Clear the room a bit.
Excuse me. Everybody, we still have further business. If everyone could take it out in the hallway.
You were back and forth. Okay, you did say that, but for some reason I thought you were
When did we not?
promoting the astroturf.
All right, we still have 2 items on the agenda for this evening. Are either of these time sensitive?
Well, I would like to make my comments on the seaport, because it's already.
Oh, yes.
Impervious, I don't know how
I
much.
I know that there was some interest expressed among the board to move forward with the site plan review text amendments. If the commission feels comfortable discussing that.
I think we could go ahead. I mean, I'm fine with.
All right, we're game,
That moving.
let's do it. Back to new business, PZ 23-005, text amendments to the zoning ordinance regarding the site plan review process. This is a public hearing to consider various changes to the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance regulations relative to site plan review. The affected sections includes but may not be limited to Section 10-2-2-4 Site Plan Review. Among the potential changes being considered include possibly changing the process as to how site plans are reviewed and approved, and what body has final decision-making authority over site plans, and under what circumstances. Other procedural and process changes to the site plan review provisions in the village's zoning code may be considered. The petitioner is the Village of Riverside. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The notice of the public hearing was published in the Landmark on March 1st, 2023, and will be marked as an exhibit. The remaining application materials will be marked as a second exhibit. Is there a motion to accept these exhibits?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Ann?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your indulgence. I know this is a late hour. The commission previously discussed the site plan amendments, and I'll try to condense what we're talking down into the briefest amount. The main changes is to make, in the process, and one of the most significant changes is to add village board review for new site plans. Currently, obviously, the commission has the final say on a new site plan. That would change to an advisory role, similar to a variation or a special use, where the Planning and Zoning Commission would still review the site plan, make a recommendation to the village board, and the village board would make the final decision on it. So just in reviewing on page 2 of the memo, a summary of the changes, that's letter C in the changes. Letters A and B are not consequential. I'd be happy to go into them, but they are less consequential changes. So starting with letter C, the Planning Commission, again, will review and recommend approval with conditions to which the applicant has agreed, or denial of the applications. And again, that would be referred to the village board. Letter D in that summary states that the village board will review the applications and make the same choices on the applications. Moving to letter E, discusses amendments to approved site plans that are considered major or minor changes. And again, currently, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviews, makes decisions on major changes. In the new process, the village board will review major change applications and either refer them to you or make the decision themselves. In letter F, the village board may make a determination that the amendment to approved determine that an amendment to approved site plan is such a significant change that it constitutes a new application. In that case, it would go through the standard new application process. Letter G is more of a minor change. In letter H, we're making some changes which are noted in red in what is considered a major change. And the point of these are to provide some sort of threshold for each one. So instead of just an increase in gross floor area, specifying the amount of the increase. So a very slight change wouldn't be considered a major change. The same consideration would be given to a change in building height. So 2 feet would be specified as the threshold. An increase in the change of dwelling units is number 3, not just a change in dwelling units. Number 4 is a reduction in open space of 5% or more. And so again, that allows some change to sidewalks, mechanical equipment, and the like without being considered a major change. Number 5 and 6 would remain the same. Number 7 would be a change in excess of 3 feet for the location of walkways, vehicular circulation ways, and parking areas. And moving to number 8, this is more of a language change than a substantive change. And basically what it's saying is that the zoning administrator can approve a minor change to an approved site plan. If you're still using native vegetation, the zoning administrator can approve that. However, if you're not using native vegetation or a non-approved species, then that would be considered a major change. Letters I, starting with letter I, the zoning ordinance allows the zoning administrator to determine that a proposed minor change actually constitutes a major change amendment. So that process still has some backstops in there, if that makes sense. Letter J, amendments to approved site plans that do not meet the criteria for major change are considered a minor change. And that specifies that the zoning administrator can approve of the conditions or deny the applications, and that the applicant can appeal that to the village board. So if the village board comes in, the zoning administrator denies a minor change, that can go to the village board for an appeal. And we removed a requirement that the applicant needs to provide evidence of adequate financing for the improvements to the site. Financing changes throughout a site project. Having the village try to determine if a project has adequate financing seems unnecessary burden for the applicant. Now, if they're proposing changes that would affect public land, they still have a bond that's required. So if they're doing, for example, if the school was doing work and they were making changes that would affect the public sidewalk, we would still require a bond to ensure that the work was done correctly. So these amendments do not affect the variation, special use, or planned unit development application processes. They would remain as the same, but, and I know that we reviewed this quickly, and I'd be happy to review these in more details if you'd like, but if you're amenable to the amendments, they would be considered by the Preservation Committee on April 13th and by the Village Board on April 20th. And to clarify, Attorney Mars clarified, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the site plan that is under review for the school, because it's a current site plan, would not be affected by these changes.
Correct, yeah, that application is in and pending and would not be affected.
All right, there is no one present to speak with regarding to this petition, so does anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts?
On the issue of the adequate financing, what prompted the removal of that?
We were looking at general improvements to the code, trying to make things less burdensome to the applicant, reasonably speaking, and I think that having an applicant submit financial information to the village, I would suspect that the applicant would be not excited to provide that information. Our ability to adequately assess the needs for their project and whether that's adequately covered by the amount is probably beyond the expertise of, municipal finance expertise. That's more of a development side. So that was the thought that, and also financing changes throughout the project.
Yeah, I would add that that kind of condition is common in redevelopment agreements when we're, putting money into a project or selling somebody property, but it's less common in site plan ordinances. I haven't seen it in others, but.
You have not, okay. Because it just struck me, if it's a large development, then you'd want to make sure that they would not build the first floor and then stop, right? I mean.
I have to agree with Ann that financing for development is so volatile, and us staff trying to evaluate a financing plan is not worth.
Should there be a threshold of a certain size development or a certain value that it would not necessarily be staffed, to be sent out to an outside expert? I'm just concerned, like our last big development was the village thing, whatever it was called. What if they just, maybe they didn't. It was right before I moved in here, but what if they just, their financing failed and they just stopped working on it?
I think a lot of financing plans don't fail because it was a bad plan. It's because economics changed, and it's something that is beyond anyone's ability to predict.
But there's still
Interest rates, for example, have now, they're at 6% or 7%, and many developers are saying that they are no longer capable of financing a project because of that, and that's entirely outside their control. So you can have a good financing plan and legitimately come to here, and there's no benefit that a review, or no protection that a review will provide.
What if it was a bad financing plan and we didn't catch that? I mean, I agree that, things can change. Credit Suisse can default to their investors, but what if it was a bad plan to begin with and it was someone who was just not really properly financed from the get-go, and then, the economy
I would argue that whoever's doing that is probably giving us a less than stellar site plan, and so it's all questionable to begin with. I don't think that there's a good reason for us to include that as a evaluation factor in a site plan.
Well, I'll just say that it's not my expertise, so I will, now that I've made my comment, I will leave it up to people at the village board level to figure that out, whether that's appropriate or not.
I think that paragraph F might address some of your concerns requiring a performance bond for a letter of credit.
That's just for the public improvements. That's like, you know, like if they're tearing up the sidewalk when they, whatever. Anyway, I've said my piece on that. I had a few minor, like textual changes to suggest things that seemed a little repetitive. And then on the criteria for what's a minor or a major, is it what's a major change? The only one I had was in the G, subparagraph G, a change in excess of, it is now 3 feet in the location of walkways, vehicle circulation ways, and parking areas, or exterior building or structure walls. I would just suggest that maybe in excess of 3 feet is appropriate for the building or structure walls, but for those other elements, maybe we could give a slightly more cushion of maybe in excess of 4 feet or 5 feet for the location of a walkway, a vehicle circulation way, or a parking area. You know, for instance, the parking lot we just saw, you know, the parking, I don't know if this would even qualify, but if they'd shifted the parking lot 3 feet, then that would be a major change, and you'd have to go through everything again. 3 feet's not a very big distance when you're talking about a parking lot. So that's my suggestion on that.
I could agree with that.
And then my other textual, should I just go through those? I
Well,
could just flag them.
before you move off that, how many feet do you think is appropriate for the walkways?
5 feet, maybe?
Okay.
Seems reasonable.
And
mean-
how about vehicle circulation and
I
parking?
think 5 feet, to me.
So everything but the walls of the
Yes, the walls of the building, I think 3 feet's
Okay.
reasonable for structural walls.
Okay.
That's my opinion. In excess of 5 feet. And then actually, I had another comment or question. So in the site plan review application section, or it's actually review and recommendation, paragraph 4. Currently, what it says, and it's still going to say that, is that during the review of the complete site plan review application for conformance with this section, and we would be recommending, not approving, we can approve with conditions to which the applicant has agreed or deny. And my question was, I guess I haven't done enough of these, is the approve with conditions to which the applicant has agreed. Is that functionally difficult? Because we have someone in front of us here, and we're basically saying, we're considering these things. We'll approve it with conditions. Do you agree? And we're asking them right as they sit here. Is that how that works? And is that difficult? Should we be building, I don't know how well to structure it, but.
I don't think it's that difficult, actually. You know, I think they know their plan. You know, generally speaking, when some people, consultants are coming in presenting plans, they know their plans pretty well, and they know what their kind of restrictions are.
Okay.
You know, for instance, with the 5 feet that I suggested, we didn't ask them if they could or could not, but I'm sure that in their head, they probably.
But they would be
said.
committing. Now, in this case, the superintendent was here.
Mhm.
I mean, what if the head of the organization, or if it was, you know, Sherwin-Williams, and, you know, the district manager had to approve it, and he wasn't here? I'm just.
I think then that
concerned.
then they would have to say, we have to take that back, and then they're stuck not getting approval.
Is that how that would work then? We'd have a delay?
You have
in
to-
the
Right, it
approval?
could either be continued, or you could
Yeah.
vote to deny, recommend denial unless they agree to it at the village board level, for instance.
Or you
Well,
could
as long as there was a cushion there that we
Yeah.
could continue it, or say, this is something you need to decide by the time you get to the village board, that's fine with me.
It's also up to that developer to decide what they're willing to do in terms of the horse trading necessary to get their plan approved, so.
Right, and all I'm saying is that we're asking them, it's this commission of 7 people talking to someone across a conference table like that. It's not like we're in a negotiating room. So depending on what the conditions are, and there could be 10 conditions that we throw up. you know.
Yes.
It could be difficult, is all I'm suggesting.
I think if we, being what I said before, is if you've got a developer who's well-financed and knows what they're doing, then as Teresa just said, they have the ability to assess that fairly quickly. They know what their sticking points are going to be. And so they know what they can give on a little bit. If it's too much to give on, then that's a different story, and then we're in a continuance or just outright rejection.
And
Any
then
other?
just my specific text changes, I don't know if I should send them to you or say them out loud in the meeting? Because it's late? Okay. In paragraph 5, I guess it would be 5, it's the one that starts review and decision by the village board in the new redlined version. I think this would be correct that in the first new text, it would be better to say, within 30 days after receiving a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, the village board shall review the recommendation. So eliminate basically the first line, because I think it's repetitive of what comes after. Upon receipt of a written recommendation.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And then within 30 days of receiving a written recommendation.
Sounds good.
And then in paragraph G2, I think it should start at the very top of the page with village staff. So delete once reviewed for completeness. Village staff shall make a determination as to whether and then eliminate the next line, amendment application is complete, period. Not whether it constitutes a major or minor change in that paragraph. We're just making a decision on completeness at this point.
Oh, yeah, because the next step then.
The next step then is major or minor change, determining a type of change. Paragraph 2, titled Determination of Type of Change.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And then under minor change amendment, subparagraph B, I think the second new sentence, it says, if the zoning administrator determines, I think that whole sentence could be struck as unnecessary. If the zoning administrator determines that the proposed change to an approved site plan constitutes a major change, such amendment application shall be submitted to the village board. I think that's not necessary, because
What
I
section
can't
are
remember
we in?
why I'm thinking.
That's 3
B.
subsection B under minor change amendment.
Yeah, because it doesn't, why reference major change amendment in the minor change amendment paragraph? Because under major change amendment, it talks about the village board considering.
I think because major change amendment doesn't actually identify the fact that the zoning administrator has already determined that it's a major change. It just goes right into, here's what you do if. So is it a matter of just moving that sentence?
That might be better, I don't know.
Basically, moving the sentence that says, if the zoning if the zoning administrator determines that the proposed change is a major change, then you go to the major change amendment, or it gets added to that 4A sentence.
So put it in for,
Yeah.
somewhere in 4A.
Just goes to 4A.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
that makes sense.
And then my very last question, it's more of a question, is in paragraph 4A, major change amendment. It says the village board, this is the fourth line down, village board shall review the recommendation and complete site plan review application for conformance with this section, and shall either refer to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and recommendation, comma, I think it should say, or shall approve for clarity.
Yeah.
But my
Agreed.
question specifically is, let's say the board refers it to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review. Is it clear elsewhere what happens after the Planning and Zoning Commission?
I believe it is.
Okay.
Especially with the change to that sentence, it'll be clear that they have one of two options. It's review, submitting to the Planning and Zoning Commission for review and recommendation, or take action on it. And then the referral back to, because we're under major change amendment to the Planning and Zoning Commission, would go back to that original section about what the process is for.
So then
Yeah.
it's clear that then it would go back to the village
Yes.
board? Okay, that was my question. Okay. All right, good. That's all I have.
It might be preferable to put bullet points on those, right?
Like
There's-
approve or?
Well,
send
it's
to-
like, yeah, review or approve with conditions or deny, or, you know what I mean, just bullet point.
Or numbers or something?
Yeah.
Within the formatting allowed by Attorney Mars, I will try to clarify as much as possible.
Yes.
I have just a clarification regarding the itemization of the major changes, E. Is any reduction in the number of parking spaces a major change, or does it have to be more than 4 parking spaces?
It's any.
So, because it says a reduction in the number of parking spaces or an increase of more than 4 parking spaces.
It's any reduction.
Yeah, so perhaps we can say any reduction in the number of parking spaces, or a reduction in the number of parking spaces in any amount, or an increase?
I'd go with
Sure.
any reduction,
Nice and simple.
simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, just as I'm just throwing it out there, at the beginning when we talk about purpose, I know that the TOD sub-districts is included in the B districts, but should we say something, including TOD sub-districts? Is that necessary? What does everybody think? I don't know.
Well, each of the B1 and B2 districts have sub-districts. I believe the intent and throughout the code, it refers to
Everything? Okay.
everything.
And then, just out of curiosity, in paragraph 4, review and recommendation by Planning and Zoning Commission, there was a sentence taken out, approval with or without conditions by the Planning and Zoning Commission. What was the purpose with taking that out?
I believe that's because we're no longer
Right.
approving anything.
Right.
We're
Okay,
only making
gotcha.
recommendations
Okay.
now that go to the board.
But is there anything in there, would our recommendation have to be by a majority of the members? Or can we just, how do we make our recommendation?
I don't see any particular reason to have it by a majority. I mean, you
Okay.
just make your recommendation and let the board
Okay.
do what it does.
Because the vote would be by majority as a matter of
Yeah,
course of the
yeah.
Planning and Zoning Commission's business, right? Or-
Well, when you say a majority of the members, so that's what I was pointing out to them. So if you only have 4 members here, a majority of members of this board is not the majority who are here. It's 4,
Sure.
right? Because it's a 7-member board. So you get in this weird situation where if there's only 4 here and it's a 3-1 vote, they're not getting a positive recommendation and it's not moving on. It wouldn't move on to the board as a positive recommendation, even though it's 3-1, right?
Okay.
So it just goes by the rules of the commission. I mean, it's.
Yeah, so if
better
there's only
not to
4
say-
here,
Yeah. Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it is what it is, and if 3 people are in favor of it, it's viewed as a positive
As
recommendation.
long as there's a quorum.
That's all I had.
I have nothing. Okay. You?
All right. Anything else? All right. In that case, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Discussion, motion, and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Village Board regarding the proposed text amendments as set forth in 6B1 above. Any further discussion? All right, let's go through these standards for text amendments. Number 1, the extent to which the proposed amendment promotes the public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare of the village.
Yes.
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 Relative gain to the public as opposed to the hardship imposed upon the applicant. No
Yes.
real hardship. Consistency of the proposed amendment with village plans.
Yes,
Yes.
consistent.
Consistency of the proposed amendment with the intent and general regulations of the zoning ordinance.
Yes, that's true.
Whether the proposed amendment corrects an error or omission, adds clarification to existing requirements, or reflects a change in policy.
Yes, I think it reflects a slight change in policy.
That the proposed amendment will benefit the residents of the village as a whole and not just the applicant, property owners, neighbors of any property under consideration, or other special interest groups, and the extent to which the proposed use would be in the public interest and would not serve solely the interest of the applicant.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's true.
Whether the proposed amendment provides a more workable way to achieve the intent and purposes of the zoning ordinance and the village plans.
Yes, it
Yes.
does.
That's the idea. The extent to which the proposed amendment creates nonconformities. Does not.
No.
The extent to which the proposed amendment is consistent with the overall structure and organization of this zoning ordinance.
Yes, it's consistent.
It's-
And just a reminder to everyone that for text amendments, not all the standards need to be met. They can be inapplicable. I know you found them to be met, but just a reminder.
Thank you. Do you have a motion?
A motion to approve the text amendment as written and as added to by this discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion?
No.
And can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Pelletier,
Aye.
Commissioner Marhold,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Braun,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hennigan.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. I would very much like to continue the discussion on impervious surface standards to next month, if
Yes,
we are okay
please.
with that. All right, excellent. In that case, Commissioner Miller, could you please give us an update on the C4 initiative?
Yes, I will do so, yes. So the C4 initiative is something that the village signed on to with a bunch of other local municipalities. C4 stands for, I had it written down. It's,
I know 3 of them. Community Climate
Yeah,
Collaborative.
let
I
me
think it's
find my sheet of
Cross
paper.
Community Climate Collaborative, I believe.
let me, where did I, oh.
Oh, cross.
Cross-community climate collaborative, right. So the goal of the cross-community climate collaborative is to reduce greenhouse gases being emitted within the different municipalities, and to also add to the resiliency with climate change of the communities and the residents within the communities. And the idea of forming a group is that, maybe there could be some benefits such as, purchase orders that could be from a larger number of municipalities. And there could also be some cross-fertilization of ideas, and one village has a good idea, and another one says, hey, we could do that too, or there's sharing of expertise, et cetera. So how does this, and I should say, so this all started, the village board signed on to this a while ago, but there was an initial meeting in April, which was a community meeting, which was basically a brainstorming session, and, people got together and they threw out a bunch of ideas, and then there was an online survey for residents to add more ideas. And there are 6 sub-teams: place, health and wellness, resource regeneration, transportation, and there's 2 more, which we don't need to go into right. because we're in a hurry. So there's a sub-team for each. So if anyone, as an individual, is interested, listening to this or in the PZC, is interested in getting involved in any of those teams, if you go to the village website, there is special page and there's an email address there that you could say, I'm interested in this, or I have this idea, and it will be divvied up among the teams, or it will be sent to trustee Marsh Osga, who's leading this, or assistant village manager Monroe. And the last thing I want to mention is just that how this is going to work with the zoning commission. Obviously, there are some things that we could be getting requests for to change the zoning code, because it would support the C4 goals of reducing greenhouse gases, which, can be through energy, through, say, solar panels, or, increasing solar panels on people's houses, or it could be allowing different kinds of landscaping in people's front yards and their street yards, or different things like that. So we might get ideas, we might get proposals, and so I think, the village board at this point would like us to look, consider those and not reject them out of hand just because they haven't been done. And perhaps we would have ideas to incentivize certain things. I think in the past, there's been some discussion of perhaps not having any permit fees for people who want to do solar panels, or issues like that. So going forward, hopefully there'll be a lot of positive energy in this. And that's about it. So anyone have any questions? No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, our next meeting will be April 26th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconds?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah,
On your
very nice.
first meeting, really.